Have you ever woken up feeling like your mind is tangled in knots, even though everything around you seems perfectly fine? You sit at the edge of your bed, and before the coffee has even hit your lips, a whirlwind of unspoken questions starts spinning. Why do my thoughts feel chaotic when nothing has changed? Why, just when I try to focus and do what's right, does a sudden wave of anxiety or doubt pull me off course? You know you have potential. Deep down, you feel it. But somehow, fear or anger, or that constant hum of self-doubt drags you back. Determination alone feels like pushing against a storm. What if the real issue isn't your grit, but the absence of guiding principles, an inner compass that helps you think clearly and live wisely in a world that never stops spinning? That's where Stoicism comes in. Imagine you're navigating a tiny boat through rapids. You could row harder, but without a compass, you'll keep spinning in circles. Stoicism is that compass. It's not dusty theory to collect cobwebs on a shelf. It's a set of practical lessons that helped ancient thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus stay grounded under extreme pressure. Battlefields, empire politics, personal tragedy. And today, it can help you keep your head when life feels like it's closing in. So here's our first lesson. True intelligence isn't measured by degrees or IQ scores. It's measured by calmness and right action when chaos surrounds you. Think about it. We often equate being smart with how many facts we can memorize or how well we can argue our point. But consider someone who can solve complex equations in seconds, but completely freezes when a loved one needs a heartfelt apology, or someone who wins every debate but fails to make a simple moral choice when it truly matters. That's not a lack of intellection. It's a gap between knowing and doing. Real wisdom is the ability to see deeper into yourself and the world and act accordingly, even when your heart pounds and your palms sweat. Picture yourself in a crowded airport rushing to catch a flight. Your phone buzzes with urgent messages. The gate just changed. You spilled coffee on your shirt. In that moment, what matters isn't how much you know about airline policies. It's your capacity to step back, take a breath, and choose the next step. Do you sprint down the terminal or calmly text a gate agent? Intelligence, Stoics would argue, is not about data. It's about disposition. It's the art of timing, a muscle built by being fully present, moment to moment. So, if your mind feels tangled tomorrow morning, don't rush to clear it with another app or quick fix. Instead, sit with the tension for a moment. Ask, what real question is beneath all this noise? Let that question guide you. Remember, intelligence isn't about what you know. It's about how you use it to live more truthfully, clearly, and purposefully. And there's no better time to start than right now, before the world's next storm arrives. Have you ever watched someone win every argument in a room, sharp retorts, flawless delivery, yet they can't seem to make a simple, kind choice when it truly counts? Maybe you've admired a friend who can solve equations in seconds, but can't apologize when they've hurt someone they love. We often think of intelligence as a mental scoreboard, how many facts we cram into our heads, how quickly we fire off one-liners. But if you've ever felt that nagging dissonance, that gap between knowing and living, then you've tasted the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So today, let's talk about redefining intelligence. Because in a world that never stops spinning, where every notification competes for our attention, the real measure of being smart isn't how much you know, it's how calmly and wisely you act when chaos strikes. Imagine standing on a crowded subway platform at rush hour. Your phone buzzes with an urgent email from work, someone's arguing loudly on the other side, and the train announcement crackles delayed due to technical difficulties. You feel that familiar knot in your stomach, right? In that moment, what truly matters isn't your GPA or how many textbooks you've read. It's your ability to pause, take a breath, and choose the next move deliberately instead of lashing out or freezing in panic. That pause, that tiny gap between stimulus and response, is where true intelligence hides. We've grown up believing intelligence is about memorizing facts, acing standardized tests, or sounding impressive in debate. But let's be honest, life doesn't reward walking encyclopedias. It rewards people who see clearly under pressure. Think of Marcus Aurelius writing his meditations in the midst of war and plague, or Epictetus, who, despite being born a slave, spent his life teaching that the one thing we can control is our own mind. They weren't bragging about how many scrolls they could recite. They were focused on acting rightly when everything around them was falling apart. Picture that for a second. An emperor whose walls were collapsing around him, yet he would wake up before dawn, remind himself that he could lose everything at any moment, and then choose to act justly and calmly. Now ask yourself, in your small wars, the flat tire, the terse boss email, the spilled coffee, do you react like a whirlwind, or do you catch yourself, even for an instant, and ask, what's the wisest next step? Scene shift, animated graphic contrasting knowledge versus wisdom. Knowledge is raw material, facts, formulas, historical dates, the latest business hack. Wisdom is vision plus right action. It's applying what you know in a way that actually serves you and the people around you. Let's break that down with an example you might recognize. Remember that brilliant debater at your college reunion? Perfect grammar, encyclopedic trivia, the kind of person journalists quote in news articles. Now imagine that same debater confronted with a family crisis. Maybe their sister needs a heartfelt apology, or their partner needs a listening ear. Suddenly, all that verbal skill becomes worthless if they can't step back from pride and offer genuine empathy. That's the gap, knowing everything about rhetoric, yet failing in the simplest moral conversation. That's why Stoics teach, true intelligence isn't about winning arguments, it's about remaining calm when you're standing in chaos and still making the right call. Today's world tries to convince us that more information equals smarter living. But if information doesn't translate into action, it's just clutter. Remember the saying, we don't lack information, we lack clarity of thought. So how do you build that clarity? First, get curious about your own reactions. Next time you're about to snap at someone or retreat into avoidance, stop. Just for a single breath. Notice the tension in your chest and ask, is this really about what's happening now? Or is it about something old I'm carrying? That simple question can expose a buried fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of looking weak, fear of losing control. When you recognize it, you've taken the first step toward wisdom. Let me share a quick story. A friend of mine, an Ivy League graduate with all the accolades, once told me that she could debate anyone on economics, but couldn't speak up when her manager took credit for her work. Every time her manager's name came up, she'd clam up, convinced it wasn't worth it to cause a scene. But months later, a terrible pattern emerged. Because she stayed silent, she was passed over for a promotion she deserved. In that moment, all her knowledge of labor laws and negotiation tactics were meaningless. She lacked the simple courage to speak her truth. She realized then that intelligence without aligned action is like a sword with no hand to wield it. From that day on, she made a pact. When facing any high-stakes conversation, she'd choose to be wise rather than right. The results? She didn't always win the argument, but she earned respect, and eventually the promotion she deserved, because she stayed calm, spoke her mind with integrity, and acted from a place of purpose, not ego. So how can you start redefining your own intelligence? First, stop measuring yourself by tests, degrees, or how many smart quotes you can drop in conversation. Instead, begin each day by asking, today, how will I choose calm over chaos? How will I turn my knowledge into right action? Second, practice that pause. You don't need to escape your life to meditate for hours. Simply pause when your heart races or your mind snaps to worst-case scenarios. Notice the emotion, label it anger or fear, and then breathe deeply. In that micro moment, you reclaim control. Third, embrace failure as feedback, not as evidence you're not smart enough. Every time you misstep, snap at someone, freeze under pressure, regret a hasty decision, you get data. Reflect, ask yourself, what part of me was reacting instinctively? What belief fueled that reaction? That's how you refine your vision and action over time. Seneca wrote that centuries ago, but today it sounds like a headline. We create storms in our minds and get swept away before anything real has happened. The Stoics would tell us, develop inner peace first. Because when you have that calm, everything else, your relationships, your work, your sense of purpose, will flow more smoothly. So next time you feel overwhelmed by information overload, mind racing, to-do list spiraling, remember knowledge is the seed, wisdom is the harvest. Let's choose to water that seed with calmness, reflection, and intentional action. Because intelligence isn't a number on a test. It's the steady hand you bring to life's storms. And that, my friends, is how we truly become wise. Have you ever spent hours reading a self-help book, filled your mind with inspiring quotes, and still felt stuck the moment real pressure arrived? It's one thing to know all the right concepts, mindfulness, resilience, empathy, but it's another thing entirely to live them out when it counts. Today, let's explore that gap between knowing and doing and discover why true wisdom isn't found in textbooks. It's born in the moments when you choose to act instead of simply think. Think back to a recent day when you were juggling a tight deadline at work. Your phone buzzed with a client's urgent request, your inbox overflowed, and a coworker snapped at you over a misunderstanding. You knew intellectually that reacting with patience would de-escalate the situation. You'd even read articles about emotional intelligence that morning. But in that split second, when your heart was racing, you blurted out a harsh comeback. Then immediately afterward, you thought, why did I say that? That, my friends, is the gap between knowing and doing. We've all been there. We absorb wisdom. Breathe through anger. Respond, don't react. We nod along, highlight the key passages, maybe even share them on social media. But when the moment actually arrives, when you or I are in the ring facing heat from every direction, our reflex is to default to old patterns, not to that new knowledge. Why is that? Because timing and presence can't be learned from a book alone. True wisdom emerges when you've practiced presence over and over, when you've hardened yourself in small, uncomfortable moments so that when the crisis hits, you can pause, observe, and choose deliberately. Let me share two real-life examples to drive this home. First, picture a mother in a low-income neighborhood. She didn't go to fancy parenting seminars. She didn't read the latest child development blogs. In fact, she barely had time to read. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to put food on the table. Yet every evening, she'd sit with her kids and listen, really listen, without checking her phone. She didn't lecture. She asked gentle questions. What happened at school today? How did that make you feel? Through consistency and presence, she taught her children empathy, respect, and responsibility. No theory, no buzzwords, just unwavering attention and the courage to remain calm when life got messy. When the rent was late, when the baby was sick, she embodied wisdom in action. That's wisdom at its purest. She knew, implicitly, when to speak, when to listen, and when to hold space. Every day she practiced presence, and the results showed. Her kids grew into thoughtful, compassionate adults. She never needed a certificate on her wall. Her life was her credential. Now imagine a blue-collar worker, let's call him Carlos, who spent decades building fences and repairing roofs. No prestigious degree, no fancy title. But Carlos has a reputation in his small town for being rock solid. He pays his bills on time, saves what he can, always lends a hand when a neighbor needs help. One summer, when half the town's crops failed, Carlos took a week off work just to help a friend salvage what was left. He didn't blog about it. He didn't seek recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Think about that. In an age where most of us want badges and likes to validate our goodness, Carlos doesn't need a standing ovation. He lives by simple principles: generosity, integrity, and self-control. He doesn't just know those words, he acts on them. That's the Stoic way, knowing when to step forward, when to step back, and doing so regardless of applause or accolades. Carlos's life teaches us that wisdom isn't an abstract concept. It's a daily, sometimes messy practice. It's waking up before dawn to get a few extra dollars saved. It's listening to a frustrated coworker without judgment. It's offering kindness when it's easier to look away. None of it makes the headlines, but it shapes his character. Here's what I want you to take away. Knowledge alone is raw material. It's the clay, but wisdom is the sculpted statue. Wisdom equals knowing when to speak, knowing when to act, and knowing when to step back. That timing, that clarity, only comes when you've practiced presence over countless small moments. Next time you find yourself in a heated email chain or a tense family dinner, pause just long enough to ask, am I choosing presence over reaction? Even if you slip up, that pause will become a practice. Over time, those small pauses accumulate until, in the biggest moments, you act with calm, purpose-driven clarity. So here's your challenge. During your next conversation, whether it's at work, with your partner, or even a stranger, notice when your mind wants to jump to conclusions or lash out in defense. Stop. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this the time to speak, or is this the time to listen? That tiny act of conscious presence is how you close the gap between knowing and doing. Remember, you don't have to be someone else's idea of smart. You just have to be wiser, present, intentional, and brave enough to act on what you know is right, even when it's hard. Because the world doesn't need more people who simply recite wisdom. It needs people who live it, day in and day out, just like that mother in Carlos. That, my friends, is the essence of true Stoic intelligence. Have you ever paused mid-action and asked yourself, am I doing this because it's right or just because I want to win? In our world of endless notifications and information overload, we chase more data, more articles, more tips, more strategies, believing that knowledge alone will solve our problems. But here's the truth. Information without introspection is like trying to light a fire with wet wood. You may have the tools, but you lack the spark. Pause for a moment and think back to the last time you felt overwhelmed by all the shoulds in your head. You knew the right thing to say or do, but when the moment arrived, say a heated conversation or a critical project deadline, you defaulted to autopilot. You reacted first and reflected later. Why? Because society has taught us to value busyness over clarity, to celebrate constant movement rather than measured stillness. But wisdom, the kind that changes lives, doesn't come from scrolling through your social feeds. It comes from turning inward. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon, wind whipping around you. You can shout your opinions into the void. But until you stop and listen to your own echo, you'll never know whether you're speaking truth or just adding noise. Reflection is that necessary stillness, a momentary retreat from the whirlwind so you can see your next step clearly. Let me share a simple practice. The next time you're about to send a scathing email or react defensively, pause and ask, is my motive to be right or is it to be fair? That split-second question can rewire your response. Instead of attacking, you might choose to understand. Instead of stonewalling, you might choose to explain. That small pivot is the catalyst for wisdom. Jesus once said, "You will know them by their fruits." In other words, it's not the eloquence of a speech that reveals true character, but the consistency of actions. Think of someone who can talk beautifully about compassion, but fails to offer help when a neighbor's in need. Their words fall flat because their life doesn't bear the fruit of kindness. If you want to measure your own growth, don't count how many articles you've read. Count how many times you chose integrity over ego. Now consider silence over speech. We live in an age where people fill every gap with noise. Podcasts, music, TikToks. But what if I told you that the wisest people often speak less and act more? Their calm actions speak louder than any speech. When criticism lands on them, they don't rush to defend or counterattack. They pause. They listen. They observe. That moment of silence isn't emptiness. It's depth. Picture a tree. Its branches may sway wildly in a storm, but its roots remain anchored. The tree doesn't shout back at the wind. It endures, bending without breaking. We too can be like that tree. When someone insults you or challenges you, your first impulse might be to fire back. But what if you instead rooted yourself in stillness? If for just a breath, you resisted the urge to react? That pause creates space for insight. You might discover that the criticism stems from someone's own fear or misunderstanding, not from an absolute truth about you. Let's put that into practice. Next time you're in a meeting and someone criticizes your proposal, don't immediately explain yourself. Don't launch into a defense. Instead, take a silent beat. Observe your own heartbeat. Notice any urge to speak or withdraw. Then ask internally, what is this person really trying to say? In that silence, you gain clarity about their perspective and about your own motivations. You might choose to respond with a simple, "Thank you for the feedback. I'll consider that," followed by genuine reflection later. That's how you turn criticism into growth. On the flip side, notice how often you speak to fill silence because you fear that awkward gap, because you're hungry for approval. But that hunger can drown out your inner voice. If you can learn to sit with the quiet, you'll start hearing your own thoughts, your deepest desires, your hidden doubts, your genuine convictions. That's where authenticity lives. Here's a question to challenge you. When did you last leave a conversation and think, I said too much and nothing I said mattered? If you can remember that feeling, you've experienced the cost of speaking before thinking. The antidote isn't speaking less for the sake of silence. It's speaking with intention, born from clarity. By practicing silence, you sharpen your mind. You no longer toss words into the wind. You let your words fall where they can take root. Reflection and silence are twin pillars of Stoic wisdom. One without the other is like a sword without a whetstone. You may have strength, but you lack precision. When you commit to regular introspection, questioning your motives, examining your beliefs, you cultivate inner clarity. When you also practice purposeful silence, choosing to act rather than speak, you demonstrate that clarity to the world. So here's a small daily ritual. Find 5 minutes, no music, no phone, to simply be with yourself. Sit in a chair or lie on your bed, close your eyes, and breathe. Let your thoughts drift, but don't chase them. Observe them like clouds passing in the sky of your mind. You might discover that many of your struggles are self-imposed, fears, judgments, desires that lose power once you expose them to the light of awareness. Then, throughout your day, carry that stillness with you. When you're tempted to interrupt yourself first with a brief pause. When you want to diagnose every piece of information, ask instead, does this matter right now? These small habits create a ripple effect. You'll find yourself responding instead of reacting, acting rather than flailing. In a world that shouts, do more, know more, speak more, dare to be the calm center. Let your life's actions be the proof of your understanding. As you reflect and embrace silence, you'll find that your choices align with your deepest principles. That alignment, that harmony between your inner wisdom and external actions, that is the fruit that truly matters. Remember, reflection is the spark, and silence is the soil. When you combine them, you cultivate a garden of wisdom that feeds every aspect of your life. The next time you're tempted to chase another headline or fire off a quick reaction, pause, reflect, embrace the quiet. Let your actions bear the fruit of true understanding. Because when you live by your reflections and speak from that deeper well, you become the steady, rooted tree in any storm. Have you ever paused in the middle of your routine and simply asked yourself, why do I believe this? What if the opposite were true? In a world full of surface-level curiosity, clickbait headlines, scrolling through endless feeds, real curiosity demands something deeper. It's not about memorizing the latest trivia or collecting facts to sound impressive. True curiosity is a relentless, almost fearless desire to understand, to see beneath the surface of your own mind, to probe the hidden patterns in the world around you, and to connect dots others don't even notice. Consider Albert Einstein, often labeled a genius because of his revolutionary ideas. Yet Einstein himself said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." Those words capture the Stoic spirit perfectly. It wasn't raw intellect that made him great, but his unwavering willingness to question everything, his own assumptions, the accepted laws of physics, and the very nature of reality. Picture a young Einstein staring out of a moving train window, wondering, what would happen if I chased a beam of light? Would I see it stand still? That simple question shattered centuries of conventional thought and became the seed for the theory of relativity. Now, don't mistake this for arrogance. Curiosity, in the Stoic sense, isn't about showing off how much you know. It's about acknowledging how much you don't know. Epictetus warned us, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. A closed mind, convinced it has all the answers, becomes nothing more than a machine repeating its own programming. But a mind that lives inside questions, that actively welcomes doubt, opens itself to growth. So how can we cultivate this kind of curiosity, especially when our lives are already overflowing with tasks and distractions? Let's break it down. 1. Turn everyday moments into question zones. Walk through your neighborhood and don't just see trees. Ask yourself, why is the bark pattern this way? How does the local climate shape these leaves? Next time you're in a grocery store line, instead of scrolling on your phone, observe the people around you. What might their stories be? How did they arrive here? That shift from passive observation to active questioning lights a spark in your mind. You begin to notice relationships between things you once thought unrelated. The way a barista's rhythm in crafting coffee mirrors a musician's timing, or how a cracked sidewalk can teach you about resilience in nature. 2. Keep a curiosity journal. Einstein filled hundreds of notebooks with questions that often seem childish. Why is the sea salty? Why do humans laugh? How can I create wings like a bat? But in those notebooks lay the fertile ground for future breakthroughs. You don't need to be Leonardo da Vinci to benefit from a journal. Start by carrying a small notebook or use a notes app on your phone and jot down every question that pops into your head, no matter how odd or irrelevant it seems. Why do I believe what I believe about success? Why does that song always tug at my heart? Write them down without judgment. Over time, patterns will emerge, guiding you to areas where your mind is begging for deeper exploration. 3. Embrace productive eustress. Curiosity isn't passive. It often demands tension, a productive eustress, as psychologists call it, that stretches your mind without breaking it. Choose a question that unsettles you. Maybe it's, what biases am I carrying without realizing? Or, what does true freedom mean to me? Sit with that question for a focused 20 minutes. No distractions. Then, drop it. Wash the dishes, take a walk, or simply stare out a window. Let your subconscious take over. Often the insight you need will surface when you least expect it, like a whisper emerging from a fog. When it does, write it down immediately. That whisper is your inner wisdom speaking, shaped by all the questions you dared to ask. 4. Seek out diverse perspectives. Nothing fuels curiosity more than encountering ideas that clash with your own. Watch a documentary about a culture vastly different from yours, read an opinion piece that challenges your political stance, or strike up a conversation with someone whose life experiences contrast yours. The goal isn't to win an argument or simply prove you're right. It's to genuinely understand why they see the world differently. When you listen without judgment, your mind expands. You start recognizing that every belief is built on a web of experiences, emotions, and context. Suddenly, questions like, why do I find that offensive? Come invitations to unravel deeper layers within yourself. 5. Practice intellectual humility. Notice how easy it is to cling to a belief because it makes you feel secure. Maybe you've always believed that success means climbing the corporate ladder. But what if you dared to ask, what if success means creating something that lasts beyond my lifetime? Humility means acknowledging that no matter how much you've learned, there's always more to uncover. It means saying, I could be wrong, and letting that possibility guide you toward fresh insights. Intellectual humility isn't weakness. It's the foundation of powerful growth. 6. Turn failure into fuel for curiosity. When a project flops or a relationship strains, your first instinct might be to blame external factors. But instead, ask yourself, what lesson is hiding in this failure? That question reframes disappointment as data. When you probe honestly, did I assume I knew too much? Did I ignore a warning sign I didn't recognize? You transform missteps into stepping stones. Curiosity thrives on that kind of relentless self-inquiry. As we cultivate curiosity, remember, there's a hidden danger in thinking curiosity itself is the finish line. It's not. Curiosity is the gateway, opens doors so we can step through and engage with the world more deeply, but we must still act on the insights we gather. If you find a blind spot in your thinking, say you realize you've judged someone unfairly, curiosity alone isn't enough. You must follow it with corrective action. Apologize. Change your behavior. Build a bridge where before there was a wall. So let me leave you with this challenge. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone or dive into your to-do list, ask yourself one profound question. Something that scares or unsettles you. What do I keep avoiding in my life? Write it down. Then notice how that question echoes throughout your day. Each time it surfaces, let your mind explore the corners it usually ignores. When night falls, reflect on what you discovered. Even if you don't have an answer yet, you've begun unlocking a deeper realm of curiosity. Remember Einstein's words. His genius wasn't a secret talent. It was his refusal to stop asking, why? Each question lit a candle in the darkness, revealing a new path. Epictetus reminds us that if we think we already know, we close ourselves off to learning. So dare to remain a beginner, a seeker. Let your curiosity be the compass that guides you through confusion and uncertainty. And in those moments, when your mind roams free, you'll discover a reservoir of insight you never knew existed. In the end, curiosity is more than a habit, it's a lifestyle, an ongoing invitation to wake up in awe, hungry not just for answers, but for the next question. Cultivate that hunger, and you'll find that your life becomes a relentless journey of discovery, where every day brings fresh wonder and the promise of new wisdom. Have you ever wondered why Leonardo da Vinci carried around dozens of little notebooks, filled not with polished essays or grand ideas, but with simple, sometimes childlike questions? In his Codex Leicester, he asks, "Why is the sea salty? Why does the sky appear blue? How can I build wings that mimic a bat's?" These aren't trivia questions. They're invitations. Each question is a spark, a way to ignite deeper thinking, to journey beyond what everyone else accepts as true. Today, let's explore how you can, like Leonardo, record your own questions and harness stress, that fertile tension that pulls insights from your subconscious. When I first learned of Leonardo's habit, I thought, that's adorable, childlike curiosity in a grown man. But then I realized his notebooks weren't just doodles. They were his secret laboratory, where his mind worked out problems both simple and profound. And you have the same power. You just need to capture it. Think about the last time something perplexed you. Maybe you saw a cracked sidewalk and thought, why did that crack form this way? Or you tasted a new coffee blend and asked, what makes these beans so different? Those questions felt trivial at first, nothing compared to the daily grind of tasks and deadlines. Yet Leonardo knew that the most revolutionary breakthroughs often begin with questions that feel too simple or even silly. His question, why does the sea salt taste different in different places, led him to observations about tides, erosion, and geography that no one had connected before. Our minds are wired for pattern seeking. When you ask why, you're nudging your brain to find hidden connections. You're telling it, don't settle for the obvious answer. Look deeper. But here's the catch. If you don't record that question, it vanishes, lost amid all the notifications and worries. That's where a genius journal comes in. Grab a small notebook. Doesn't need to be fancy, just something you can carry. Or use a simple notes app on your phone. Every time a question pops up, no matter how odd or incomplete, write it down. I remember during a lunch break, I spotted a lone balloon stuck on a tree branch. I paused and thought, how long has that balloon been there? What stories does it hold? 10 seconds later, I opened my notebook and jotted, how do forgotten objects shape the stories of a place? That question led me to interview neighbors about lost items in the neighborhood, finding surprising threads about memory and community. The point isn't to find an answer immediately, it's to preserve the question itself, because it marks the moment your mind encountered something outside the ordinary. In fact, many of Leonardo's questions never had clear solutions in his lifetime. He didn't need an immediate answer. He needed the curiosity to fuel his exploration. Once you've recorded your question, it's time to apply what psychologists call lustrous, useful stress. Not so much that you crack under pressure, but just enough tension to make your mind stretch. Here's how it works. Choose one question. Maybe it's, whose style or whose values am I truly living by? Or why does my chest tighten when I think about my job? And spend a focused 20 minutes on it. No multitasking, no scrolling through emails. Just sit, pen in hand, and lean into the discomfort of not knowing. During those 20 minutes, your conscious mind digs around, searching for patterns, memories, emotions. You might feel frustrated. I don't have an immediate answer. But that's exactly the point. That tension signals your subconscious to start working. After the timer dings, here's the trick. Drop the question. Go wash dishes, walk around the block, or do some mindless task. You're not abandoning the question. You're giving your deeper mind space to process. Often, if you're paying attention, a sudden insight will bubble up, like a whisper from your unconscious. You might think, oh, of course, my family's expectations shape my career choices more than I realized. Or actually, I fear change because I equate it with instability. When that moment hits, stop and capture it. Crack open your journal again and write down every thought, every fragment of clarity. Don't judge or polish it. Just record. A friend of mine, Emily, was stuck in a corporate role she hated. She'd read every self-help guide on finding passion, yet kept returning to the same twisted feeling of, what if I fail? One evening she wrote down, what am I most afraid of losing if I leave this job? She spent 20 minutes writing stream of consciousness notes, fear of financial instability, worry about disappointing her parents, the embarrassment of an uncertain future. Then she washed dishes and mindlessly folded laundry. 2 days later, while making coffee, she had a moment of clarity. I'm not afraid of the work being hard. I'm afraid of never trying anything else. That realization let her pivot. She created a budget that allowed a trial freelance period. A month into that, she felt more alive than she had in years. That's the magic of Eustress. It's not about forcing an answer, but creating the right conditions for insight to emerge. So, your action steps for the next week. 1. Carry a small journal and write down every question, however trivial it seems. 2. Choose one question daily, apply 20 minutes of focused reflection, then distract yourself with a simple task. 3. When an idea or feeling surfaces, capture it immediately. Over time, you'll see patterns, threads linking your goals, your fears, and your deepest desires. In a world drowning in data, significance comes not from having more information, but from mining the wisdom hidden in our own questions. Leonardo didn't simply gather facts, he interrogated them continuously. He knew the surface answers weren't enough, and neither are ours. By recording your questions and leaning into Eustress, you activate your mind's hidden potential. You'll begin to notice correlations you never saw before, how a childhood memory influences a current fear, or how a casual observation in your morning commute connects to a long-term goal. So tomorrow morning, before your email pings or social apps demand your attention, ask yourself, what unanswered question is whispering in my mind? Write it down. Then lean in, sit with the tension, and let your subconscious do its quiet work. Over time, you won't just collect answers. You'll transform your entire approach to life. You'll learn to think deeper, move with purpose, and discover insights that remain hidden to those who never pause long enough to ask, what can I know? Remember, your questions are the doorways to your greatest revelations. Record them, embrace the challenge, and watch as your mind lights up one insight at a time. Have you ever sat down to learn something new, maybe a complex formula or a historical timeline, and felt your mind glaze over halfway through? You're not alone. We've been conditioned to believe that reading and memorizing are the fastest paths to mastery. But what if I told you that true understanding comes not from staring at text, but from activating every sense you possess? In Stoic practice, the body and mind are inseparable. Engaging your senses is the key to anchoring knowledge deep within you. Today, let's explore how vision, hearing, touch, movement, taste, and smell can transform your learning into a vivid, living experience. Picture Leonardo da Vinci. He didn't just scribble formulas in a dusty corner. He sketched, observed, and felt the world around him. For him, vision was more than seeing. It was perceiving layers of nuance. When he drew a leaf, he wasn't simply copying its outline. He trained his eye to notice the subtle shifts of light and shadow, the way veins crisscrossed like tiny rivers, the blush of green fading into bronze where decay began. That act of drawing forced him to look deeper, to see the living essence of the leaf, not just its shape. And in that way, Da Vinci's vision became a powerful tool for learning. Each sketch was a lesson in observation and nuance. So how can you harness that same power? The next time you study, put down the highlighters and pick up a pencil. If you're learning anatomy, sketch a bone or muscle group in your own hand, noticing how it curves, where it connects. If you're exploring geometry, trace shapes on paper, turning abstract lines into tangible arcs. your hand can follow. That simple act of drawing forces your brain to translate two-dimensional symbols into something your senses can grasp. The result? You move from "I see it on the page" to "I understand it in my body." Now let's talk about hearing. We live in a world of ceaseless noise, podcasts, playlists, phone notifications, but true listening is rare craft. Imagine sitting in a crowded cafe when someone next to you whispers a story that ends with a breathless pause. You don't just hear the words. You listen to the hesitation, the tremor in their voice. That silence between sentences often speaks louder than any phrase. In Stoicism, a wise person doesn't rush to fill every gap with words. They learn to tune in to what's unsaid, the weight behind that sip of coffee, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Try this. Turn off the music on your commute. Instead, listen to the hum of the engine, the rustle of leaves outside, even the murmur of your own breath. In that quiet, you sharpen your awareness. You become attuned not only to others' voices, but to the rhythm of your own mind. Touch and movement are equally powerful teachers. Think back to the last time you wrote something by hand, perhaps a heartfelt letter, or even a mundane grocery list. Chances are the act of handwriting imprinted those words far deeper in your memory than if you'd merely typed them. That's because physical interaction engages different pathways in your brain. When you trace letters with your fingers, you create a sensory connection that cements the concept. So, if you're studying a new language, try writing vocabulary flashcards by hand instead of tapping them into an app. Feel the weight of the pen, the friction of ink on paper. As you do this, you're not just memorizing words, you're building a tactile bridge between your brain and the language itself. Movement takes this one step further. When you stand up, walk around, or perform a simple stretching routine during study breaks, you're letting your body process information in a way that sitting still cannot. Studies have shown that moderate movement boosts brain function. Your heart pumps more oxygen to the brain, and neurotransmitters get stimulated. Next time you're stuck on a problem, don't stay glued to your chair. Walk to the window, feel the floor beneath your feet, swing your arms gently. Notice how your mind often solves puzzles when you step away. That's your body helping your mind see from a new angle. But what about taste and smell? We often overlook these senses in learning, yet they are powerful anchors for emotion and memory. Think of the aroma of fresh coffee in the morning, how it can signal a new day, awaken your senses, and prepare your mind for focus. Or consider the scent of pine after rain, which might bring you back to childhood camping trips. If you're studying in a particular environment scented with a specific candle or essential oil, lavender for calm, peppermint for clarity, over time your brain will associate that scent with focused concentration. When you encounter that smell later, even in a different context, it can trigger the same state of mind. This is called context-dependent memory, and you can use it intentionally. Before you dig into a challenging topic, like that dense philosophy text or a complex engineering concept, spritz some citrus oil, chew a piece of peppermint gum, or sip a cup of green tea. Your brain will link that sensation to deep focus. Later, when you need to recall what you've learned, reintroduce that scent or taste. Instantly, you spark that same mental state. Now, I want to offer a quick exercise that combines all of these senses. Choose a concept you're currently learning, maybe a chapter in a history book or a math theorem. First, read it aloud to engage your hearing. As you read, close your eyes for a moment and picture the images or scenes suggested by the words, activating your vision. Then, sketch a simple diagram or mind map on paper, engaging touch. Stand up and explain the concept to an imaginary friend, using gestures to involve movement. Finally, take a sip of coffee or tea, let the taste anchor your focus, and breathe in the aroma of the beverage. By weaving these sensory threads together, you turn passive reading into a rich tapestry of experience. And according to Stoic wisdom, a mind fully engaged through the senses is a mind rooted in the present moment, resilient, clear, and deeply alive. In a world flooded with information, the easiest path is to skim, to skim, to skim. But skimming never builds depth. The Stoics remind us that knowledge is empty without presence. So as you pursue your next learning goal, remember, engage your senses as extensions of your thought. See not just the words on the page, but the shades of meaning behind them. Listen not just to sounds, but to hidden truths in every pause. Touch not just objects, but the texture of your own understanding. Move not just your body, but the currents of your mind. Taste not just flavors, but the essence of focus. Smell not just scents, but the signal of memory. When you learn this way, your mind doesn't just hold information. It becomes a vivid landscape where knowledge thrives. And in that landscape, you're not merely enduring life. You're fully, brilliantly living it. Have you ever stared at a page of dense text, formulas, dates, abstract concepts, and felt your mind go blank? That's because the human brain isn't designed to learn purely through words on a page. We learn best when we involve our entire selves, our eyes, our ears, our hands, even our sense of smell and taste. In Stoic philosophy, body and mind are inseparable. To truly understand an idea, you must embody it, feel it, and let it anchor itself deep within your senses. Today, let's explore how engaging each of our senses can transform learning from a mechanical task into a living, breathing experience. 1. Vision, beyond mere seeing. Imagine Leonardo da Vinci sketching sunlight filtering through a forest canopy. He didn't just see trees. He perceived the play of light and shadow, the subtle shifts of color, the texture of bark. For him, drawing wasn't a mere hobby, it was education. When you sketch a concept, whether it's a simple mind map or a detailed diagram, your eyes focus on nuance. Instead of merely reading about the structure of a cell, draw it. Notice the way the nucleus nests inside the membrane, how organelles cluster. Feel the curves of each part. That process trains your brain to observe details you would otherwise miss. A smile's slight asymmetry, the grain in a wooden surface, the trembling of a speaker's lip. Each line you draw is a lesson in perception, not just memorization. So the next time you struggle to remember a theory, close your notebook for a moment, pick up a pencil and translate that theory into a sketch. Watch how your understanding deepens. 2. Hearing, the art of true listening. We live in a world of relentless noise, podcasts, playlists, notifications, but listening isn't the same as hearing. When someone truly listens, they catch the hesitations between words, the subtle shift in tone, the silence that speaks volumes. Think about a heated conversation you've had, maybe a difficult talk with a colleague or a candid chat with a friend. You probably noticed that the most significant truths weren't always in what they said, but in what they didn't say, the catch in their voice, the pause before a confession. To harness this in learning, try reading your notes aloud. Hear the rhythm of the sentences, the way emphasis changes the meaning. In a classroom, close your eyes for a second and focus on the instructor's voice. Listen for the energy, the conviction. Even a silent moment in a lecture carries weight. That pause might signal a key point is coming. Outside the classroom, turn off background noise on your commute. Instead of filling the silence with music, tune into the world. Car tires rolling on asphalt, birdsong, your own breathing. As you cultivate this deep listening, you'll find that your mind learns not just words, but the feeling behind them. 3. Touch and movement, learning through action. Touch is often underestimated in learning, yet consider how writing a friend's phone number by hand imprints more firmly in memory than typing it. When you trace letters, you create a physical connection. Ink meets paper, your hand presses and moves in loops. That tactile feedback sends signals to your brain, forging neural links that pure reading can't create. So if you're absorbing new information, vocabulary, formulas, historical dates, write them by hand. Feel each stroke. As you do, you're not just memorizing, you're building pathways that tie body to mind. Now let's add movement. Picture a scientist in a lab pacing as they think, or a dancer improvising steps to embody a new idea. Movement wakes your brain. When you stand, stretch, or pace while grappling with a problem, your heart pumps more oxygen to your brain, your neurons fire more rapidly, and new connections form. So next time you're stuck, don't keep your head buried in a book. Stand up, walk a few steps, say the concept out loud as you move. Notice how your body's shift can spark fresh perspectives, solutions that eluded you while sitting. 4. Taste and smell, anchors for memory. Taste and smell are the unsung anchors of memory. Think about the aroma of fresh coffee in the morning. It's more than just a pick-me-up. It signals time to focus. Or recall how a whiff of your grandmother's perfume can instantly transport you back to childhood. In learning, you can harness these sensory triggers. Before diving into a challenging lesson, brew a specific tea, peppermint perhaps, or light a particular scented candle. The taste of that tea or the scent of that candle becomes linked in your mind to deep concentration. Later, when you need to recall that information, say during an exam, sipping the same tea or catching that scent can summon the same focused state. Conversely, if a concept is troubling you, a quick taste of dark chocolate can reset your mood and prime your brain for a breakthrough. 5. Practice, a sensory learning exercise. Let's put this all together with a simple exercise. Pick a concept you're working on, maybe a chapter in a philosophy book or a coding algorithm. First, read it aloud to hearing. Then, close your eyes and visualize. Sketch a quick diagram on paper, vision plus touch. Next, stand up and explain that concept to an imaginary friend using hand gestures, movement. Finally, grab a small piece of dark chocolate or mint gum, taste it, and let the aroma fill your senses. Taste plus smell. Notice how each sense reinforces the others. By the time you sit back down, you are not just familiar with the concept. You have experienced it with your whole self. 6. Connecting to reality beyond abstraction. In modern life, it's easy to disconnect our minds from our bodies, to think we can absorb knowledge through endless apps and ebooks while sitting lifeless in front of screens. But reality is sensory. When a seasoned investor looks at a market chart, they feel the ebb and flow. They sense panic in the trading volume, volatility in the color shifts on the screen. An outsider seeing the same chart only perceives collapse. That investor's edge comes from tuning into market psychology, from letting sight and sound and even gut feeling inform their decisions. You can do the same in your own learning. If you're studying biology, don't just read about cellular respiration. Observe yeast bubbling in a petri dish. If you're learning a new language, don't just memorize vocabulary. Touch the pages of a children's picture book in that language. Feel the weight of each character. Hear a native speaker pronounce it. When you reconnect your mind and body, you engage with the material on multiple levels, making it real, not abstract. Stoic wisdom, presence through the senses. The Stoics taught that wisdom arises in the present moment, not in distracted daydreams. Engaging your senses anchors you in now. When you truly see, hear, touch, smell, and taste, your mind silences the clutter of worry and doubt. You become fully alive to the lesson at hand, and from that place of sensory presence, real understanding flows. So the next time you face a challenge, whether mastering a tough subject or navigating a complex life problem, remember, don't just read, sketch it, speak it, feel it, taste it, listen to it. Become a full-bodied learner. In doing so, you'll not only retain information more effectively, but also deepen your experience of life itself. Because in Stoic thought, wisdom doesn't come from disconnected thoughts. It emerges when mind and body work in harmony, rooted firmly in the sensory reality of now. Have you ever found yourself standing at a crossroads, your heart pounding, your palms sweaty, because you're not sure which path to take? Maybe it's choosing between a stable job that pays the bill and a passion project that lights you up inside. Or deciding whether to speak up in a meeting when your idea feels raw and unpolished. That knot in your stomach? It's your brain's fast system, our instinctive, pattern-driven mind, telling you to stay in the safe zone. Uncertainty feels like danger because predictability is our comfort blanket. The problem is, life rarely hands us a perfect script. When we cling to certainty, we end up stuck in analysis paralysis, sifting through endless options until we can't move at all. But here's what Stoics teach us. Clarity isn't found in guaranteeing an outcome. Clarity is discovered in our effort and discipline. Marcus Aurelius, regardless of an empire teetering on collapse, reminded himself every morning that he could lose everything at any moment, and yet he focused on what he could control: his character, his effort, and his attitude. He didn't sit back waiting for perfect conditions. He chose action in uncertainty. And that act of courage, choosing discipline over comfort, is where real power lies. So let's dig into two key ideas. First, understanding fear and hesitation. And second, choosing courage over comfort. 1. Understanding fear and hesitation. Ask yourself, why does uncertainty feel so threatening? Evolutionarily, our fast system equates the unknown with potential harm. If our ancestors wandered into a dark forest without knowing what lurked behind the trees, they risked their lives. Today, the stakes aren't usually life or death, but our brain doesn't know the difference between lion in the bushes and new project you've never tried. Endless career options, relationship choices, social media comparisons, they all feed our fast system's craving for predictability. And as we weigh pros and cons, we double-click on minor details until the entire picture becomes a maze. We end up frozen, trapped by our own need to be sure. Yet the Stoic promise is this: we can cultivate clarity in action, not guarantee a specific outcome. In the Enchiridion, Epictetus reminds us that we are disturbed not by what happens to us, but by our judgments about what happens. When you face uncertainty, whether it's a tough conversation or a big career decision, your job is not to ensure every variable aligns perfectly. Your job is to show up, do what's right, and focus on what you can control: your effort, your preparation, and your response. The outcome, that's shaped by external forces outside your sphere, but your action, that's your power. 2. Choosing courage over comfort. Now, let's talk about courage. It doesn't mean you feel fearless. In fact, you should feel fear. That's your brain's warning system. Courage is moving forward despite fear. Picture a classic trap. You spend weeks perfecting your resume for a safe corporate gig you don't actually care about because it seems secure. You chase high grades in a major that bores you simply because you think you should. You build a comfortable routine and avoid any door that feels unknown. But ask yourself, what did you gain from that comfort? Sure, you may have a nice paycheck or a diploma, but you also traded away part of your authentic self, your curiosity, your passion, your spark. I once followed that same script. I chose a practical major because it sounded smart on paper. I picked side gigs recommended by others, ones that looked good on a resume, even though they didn't excite me. I told myself I'd explore my real interests someday, when the time was right. But here's the catch: that someday never came. My ideas felt stale sitting on a shelf of comfort. One morning I woke up feeling like I was sleepwalking through someone else's life, a life neatly planned by expectations, not by my own desires. I realized I had been perfecting my safety net while ignoring a restless voice inside me saying, "This isn't your path." So I did something radical. I enrolled in a class that terrified me: public speaking. I'd always been terrified of attention, convinced I'd embarrass myself. But I signed up anyway, heart thundering, palms sweaty. My first presentation was a mess. I stuttered, lost my train of thought, and felt my face burn. But when I finally sat down, something unexpected happened: a spark of exhilaration. I had moved through fear instead of shrinking from it. I felt alive. That single step, embracing the risk of looking peaceful in front of strangers, built a muscle in me, the muscle of courage. Each subsequent uncertain step, pitching a project that wasn't guaranteed to succeed, sharing an idea that others might criticize, built that internal strength. It became easier to face uncertainty because I had trained myself to focus on action, not outcome. Instead of asking, "Will this succeed?" I asked, "Am I doing what feels right?" And each yes to action, each leap into uncertainty, became a lesson in self-trust. How you can practice courage today: identify one unsafe choice. Is there a conversation you have been avoiding because it feels too risky? Perhaps telling a loved one how you truly feel, or confronting a toxic dynamic at work. Choose that conversation today. Prepare your thoughts, breathe deeply, and step into it. You might stumble, and that's okay. The point isn't flawless execution. It's the act of showing up. Set a small, uncomfortable goal. Maybe you've always wanted to learn a new skill, a dance style, painting, coding, but you've held back because you're afraid of being a beginner. Pick one class or tutorial and commit to attending or starting today, even if you feel awkward. That spark of fear means you're alive. Embrace it. Shift your focus to effort. Before you take any step, ask yourself, what's within my control here? Make that your focus. If you're starting a side project, control how many hours you dedicate each day. If you're applying for a job you feel underqualified for, control how thoroughly you research and tailor your application. When you orient toward effort, you release the pressure of guaranteeing a perfect outcome, and anxiety loses its grip. Practice micro leaps. Courage doesn't require giant leaps. Sometimes it's a series of micro leaps. Speak up once in a meeting when you usually stay silent. Offer feedback to someone on a project. Apply for one position that stretches you. Each micro leap builds resilience so that when bigger storms hit, you stand grounded rather than wilting. Stoic wisdom on courage. Marcus Aurelius didn't have a crystal ball guaranteeing a peaceful reign. He faced war, plague, and betrayal. Yet he woke each morning reminding himself, "Today I may lose everything I hold dear." He wrote not to dwell on fear, but to anchor himself in purpose. He asked, "Is this action in accordance with virtue? Is it who I want to be?" That question guided him through uncertainty. And it can guide you too. In the face of fear, ask yourself, what would a person of integrity do? When you act from that place, rather than chasing ease, you cultivate the deepest form of freedom. Closing thoughts. Today, let's stop glorifying comfort. Instead, celebrate each step into the unknown. Remember, your heart pounding is not a sign of weakness. It's proof you're alive. Uncertainty is inevitable. What's optional is how you face it. Will you shrink back, letting fear rob you of possibility? Or will you lean in, focus on your effort, and choose courage over comfort? The Stoics teach us that our greatest power lies not in controlling the world, but in choosing our response. So take that step, embrace the uncertainty, and watch as each courageous act, no matter how small, builds a life richer, bolder, and more profoundly your own. Have you ever felt stuck in a rut because you've been told you're either a left-brain person or a right-brain person? Education systems often force us into neat boxes, science or art, logic or creativity, when in reality the most brilliant thinkers weave analysis and imagination together. Today, let's explore how whole-brain thinking, integrating both analytical rigor and creative spark, can transform not only how you learn, but how you live and solve problems. 1. Beyond the left brain, right brain split. Imagine your brain as a city. The left hemisphere is the grid of orderly streets, the district where numbers, facts, and logical structures thrive. The right hemisphere is the winding lanes of an art quarter, alive with metaphor, images, and out-of-the-box connections. Traditional schooling often channels us straight into one district or the other, teaching math kids to fear poetry and art kids to fear algebra. But consider Leonardo da Vinci. He was neither only a scientist nor only an artist. He sketched anatomical diagrams of a fetus in the womb with exacting scientific detail, then filled the margins with poetic renderings of the human form. His mind didn't operate in a straight line. It wove ideas together like threads in a tapestry. That's whole brain thinking, letting analytical precision dance with imaginative insight. Likewise, Albert Einstein credited his theory of relativity to a moment of wild imagination. At 16, he pictured himself riding alongside a beam of light, wondering what the world would look like from that perspective. That vivid mental image, more akin to storytelling than cold calculation, became the seed that led to ESMC2. The math came later. If Einstein had suppressed imagination in favor of pure logic, he never would have cracked relativity. The lesson? Analysis without creativity is brittle. Creativity without structure is chaotic. Whole brain thinking is the art and science of letting both hemispheres talk to each other. 2. Practical tools for whole brain thinking. How do you move from, "I know I should integrate both sides of my brain," to actually doing it? Let's look at a few simple but powerful practices. Mind maps. You've probably seen a mind map, a central idea with the branches of related thoughts, each branching further into sub-ideas. Instead of drafting a rigid outline in a linear list, draw a circle in the center of a blank page with your main topic, say, healthy lifestyle, and then sketch out spokes: nutrition, exercise, mindfulness, sleep. Beneath each spoke, add smaller circles or even little icons. Under nutrition, you might draw a fork and knife, jot whole foods, or sketch a simple bowl of oatmeal. Under exercise, draw a sneaker, write morning walk, or note yoga. The act of drawing, doodling, and linking words to simple images engages both logic, categorizing, structuring, and creativity, visual symbols, lateral associations. As you trace lines with your pen, both hemispheres of your brain light up, reinforcing memory and forging unexpected connections, like recalling a recipe when thinking about fitness, or remembering a deep breath exercise when stressed. Draft plans as visual mind maps. When planning a project, say organizing a weekend hiking trip, resist the temptation to write a simple checklist. Instead, start with a mind map. Put hiking trip in the center. Branch out to gear, route, food, safety, and companions. Under gear, sketch a water bottle next to hydration pack, a tent icon next to shelter, and so on. That visual plan activates your spatial visual sense. You literally map out relationships, anticipate how each element fits together, and create a richer mental model than bullet points ever could. The next time your mind feels fried by endless to-dos, grab a blank sheet and draw. Give yourself permission to make it messy, to let your pen wander. You'll find that circles, arrows, and quick sketches help your brain re-engage. Learn by drawing and explaining out loud. Suppose you're trying to understand supply and demand curves in economics. Instead of passively reading an article, draw a graph on paper, label the axes, and sketch how price moves when supply increases or demand decreases. As you draw, say each step out loud. When demand increases, the curve shifts to the right, raising equilibrium price. Your spoken words engage your auditory sense. Your drawing engages your visual spatial sense. The act of writing engages touch, and your internal logic ensures accuracy. By speaking and sketching together, you force the two hemispheres to collaborate. You'll remember not only that supply increases push prices lower, but also why, because you've physically walked your brain through the steps. That's integration. Reverse engineer desired outcomes. When facing a problem, say planning a surprise birthday gathering, start with the end in mind and work backward on a whiteboard or a sketch pad. Draw a timeline backed out from the party date. 2 weeks prior, choose cake. 1 week prior, send invites. 3 days prior, confirm attendance, and so on. Visually mapping tasks backward forces you to see dependencies, potential roadblocks, and creative solutions, maybe moving an event date if a venue is unavailable. This approach awakens your right brain's knack for visualizing scenarios and your left brain's knack for sequential logic. Suddenly, planning feels less like a chore and more like a puzzle you're eager to solve. Stand up, walk, and draw when your mind feels fried. We've all been there. You stare at the screen, words blur, and ideas stall. Instead of grabbing another coffee, stand and stretch. Take a brief walk, even if it's just around your desk, then return to a blank sheet of paper. Jot down the problem in a single word at the center. Proposal, for instance. Draw a circle around it and let your pen roam. Write any word or doodle that comes to mind. Audience, data, emotion. Draw arrows connecting them. Don't judge or censor yourself. In that process, you wake up neural pathways, spatial, kinesthetic, emotional, that were dormant while sitting still. Before long, you'll see connections you missed while hunched over the screen. Whole brain thinking thrives on movement and visual cues. Give your brain a chance to reset. 3. The Stoic perspective, integration as presence. Stoic philosophers didn't write treatises on mind mapping or sketching techniques, but they lived with a deep sense that wisdom arises in presence, being fully aware of all aspects of an experience. When Marcus Aurelius reflected on the nature of the universe, he didn't just philosophize abstractly. He observed nature's rhythms, the motion of the heavens, the interplay of events in daily existence. His meditative practice was a form of whole brain thinking. He combined reflective introspection and inward logical discipline with an acute awareness of his surroundings, the man shepherding sheep on a hillside, the glint of sunlight on a sword, the rush of wind through an open balcony. He integrated inner reflection, left brain, with sensory engagement, right brain. 4. Real-life example. The modern innovator. Take Elon Musk, whose ventures range from electric cars to colonizing Mars. He famously uses first principles thinking, a very analytic tool, to break problems down to their most basic truths. But he also relies on vivid mental simulation. He pictures rockets landing vertically on a floating barge in the middle of the ocean. Those mental images, relying on his right brain's imaginative capacity, guide the real engineering. By oscillating between rigorous calculation and creative visualization, he solves problems that others deem impossible. That's whole brain brilliance in action. 5. Bringing whole brain thinking into your day. Morning brain dump. Each morning, take 5 minutes to jot down whatever's on your mind. Tasks, worries, random ideas. Use words, doodles, or quick sketches. This frees your mind of clutter and primes both hemispheres for the day. Use color coding. When taking notes, highlight keywords in one color and jot doodles or quick icons in another. Your eyes register both the conceptual and the visual patterns, making retrieval easier. Teach an idea to a friend. Explaining something out loud forces integration. You tap into logical structure while searching for metaphors or analogies. Creative sparks that make complex ideas relatable. Prototype with your hands. If you have a problem to solve, redesigning a workspace layout, for instance, grab paper, pens, or even cardboard models. When you build a rough physical prototype, your right brain senses spatial relationships while your left brain evaluates practicality. Set aside creative breaks. Once a day, give yourself 10 minutes to doodle without purpose, draw shapes, sketch symbols, or scribble abstract forms. Let your mind roam freely. These short creative bursts refresh the right brain, making it easier to return to analytical tasks with renewed clarity. 6. Why it matters. In a world inundated with data, the temptation is to think purely in spreadsheets, bullet points, and checklists, until you realize that innovation, empathy, and insight often sprout from connecting ideas in unexpected ways. Whole brain thinking arms you with the flexibility to pivot. The analytic side lets you break down problems, while the creative side lets you see novel solutions. When you integrate both, you aren't just doing a job, you're engaging in an art form, turning every challenge into an opportunity for growth. So the next time your mind feels boxed in, torn between logic and creativity, remember Da Vinci and Einstein. Picture them sketching alongside numbers, dreaming up thought experiments that defied convention. Grab a blank page, draw a mind map, doodle a quick diagram, speak your ideas aloud. Make your learning a sensory experience that marries analysis with imagination. That, my friends, is whole brain thinking. And in that space, you won't just solve problems. You'll discover new worlds of possibility. Have you ever tried to solve a problem when you're exhausted, foggy-headed, or jittery? Maybe you reach for another cup of coffee thinking a caffeine jolt would clear your mind. But deep down, you know that no amount of coffee can substitute for a well-tuned body. The Stoics, and Leonardo da Vinci himself, understood that your mind is not a separate entity floating above your body. It's a passenger riding in a vessel, and if that vessel is weak, cracked, or fueled by junk, your thinking will be blurred, your focus impaired, and your spirit dulled. So today, let's explore how caring for your body, your foundation, directly sharpens your mind, and walk through practical daily habits so you can feel more clarity, energy, and resilience every single day. 1. The body is the foundation for deep thought. Imagine a world-class athlete, maybe a gymnast or a swimmer, honestly, anyone you admire who's at the peak of their physical prowess. Their body is strong, flexible, and balanced. Now imagine asking that athlete to perform a complex mental task, solve a complicated equation, or negotiate a high-stakes deal right after a grueling workout. Chances are they would struggle if they didn't give themselves time to recover. A healthy body doesn't just help you run faster or lift heavier. It oxygenates your brain, regulates your hormones, and helps you maintain emotional balance. Leonardo da Vinci knew this more than anyone. He didn't sit in a library for hours on end. He sketched, explored nature, practiced fencing, and engaged in physical crafts like sculpting and engineering. He understood that strength, health, and balance weren't merely aesthetic goals. They were the very foundation upon which deep, creative thought could flourish. 2. Poor nutrition and its mental fog. Now think about your own daily habits. How often have you reached for a sugary soda, fast food, or processed snacks just because they're quick and convenient? I'll be blunt. This kind of habit is like trying to run high-performance software on outdated hardware. Our brains run on energy, yes, but not on empty calories, refined sugars, and unhealthy fats. I once knew someone who drank a can of soda every morning, just one habit among many. Over time, he noticed his focus slipping, his irritability rising, and his patience evaporating. When he committed to cutting out sugary drinks and fast food, opting instead for fresh greens, lean proteins, and whole grains, the clarity didn't come overnight. But within weeks, his motivation returned, his decision-making sharpened, and his mood stabilized. He was no longer riding an emotional roller coaster fueled by sugar spikes and crashes. That's what the Stoics meant when they spoke of caring for the vessel. Your physical choices determine the quality of your thinking. 3. Daily habits for mental clarity. So what does it look like to feed your mind by nourishing your body? Let's break it down into 4 core pillars: diet, sleep, movement, and mind-body awareness. Diet, fuel for the brain. First, let's talk diet. The modern food environment bombards us with cheap, hyper-palatable options loaded with artificial sugar and fried oils. These might taste great in the moment, but they make your cells sluggish and your mind foggy. Instead, shift toward real, whole foods that stabilize blood sugar and reduce inflammation. Think raw greens, spinach, kale, arugula, paired with lean proteins like chicken, fish, or plant-based sources. Add healthy fats from nuts, seeds, or avocados to support brain function. And when you eat, do it mindfully. Chew slowly, notice flavors and textures, and pay attention to when you feel satisfied rather than overeating out of habit. When you practice mindful eating, you not only absorb nutrients more effectively, your mind also learns to be present, which is the root of clarity. Sleep, the non-negotiable. Next, sleep. If you're rolling with 5 or 6 hours a night, or worse, grabbing an energy drink and powering through, you're shortchanging your brain more than your waistline. Aim for at least 7 hours of quality rest. That means shutting off screens, phones, tablets, laptops at least an hour before bed. The blue light from screens tricks your brain into thinking it's daytime, suppressing melatonin and robbing you of deep restorative sleep. Instead, use that pre-bedtime hour to read a book, journal, or do gentle stretches. If you wake up groggy, ask yourself, did I go to bed at a consistent time? Did I avoid late-night snacking? Did I eliminate caffeine by mid-afternoon? When sleep becomes inviolable, your mind in the morning will be crisp, your focus sharper, and your emotional resilience stronger. Movement. Energize your system. Now let's get moving. A sedentary life is like parking your car in a garage and never running the engine. You'll find it stiff and unresponsive when you finally need it. Schedule at least 30 minutes a day to walk outside. Feel the air on your skin, notice the trees swaying, listen to birds or traffic. Whatever your surroundings, let your senses awaken. If walking is your baseline, consider adding yoga, dance, or martial arts. These practices release stored tension in your muscles, improve flexibility, and enhance mind-body connection. In yoga, you learn to breathe through discomfort. In dance, you embody rhythm and flow. In martial arts, you focus your energy and sharpen both mind and reflexes. Each of these activities doesn't just sculpt your body, it trains your mind in presence, resilience, and calm decision-making under pressure. Mind-body awareness, tuning in. Finally, let's talk about the subtle but powerful practice of mind-body awareness. You don't need an elaborate meditation retreat to start. Even a simple 5-minute of breath focus each morning can be transformative. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and tune into your breath. Feel the rise and fall of your chest, notice your heartbeat, sense any tension in your shoulders or jaw. When thoughts intrude, as they inevitably will, label them thinking and gently return to the breath. This practice builds a crucial skill, noticing early signs of stress before they escalate. If your shoulders clench at your desk, you'll catch it. When your stomach tightens under a looming deadline, you'll see it. That tiny act of awareness often pauses the reactive loop, allowing you to choose a deeper breath instead of snapping or withdrawing. Over time, you'll avoid burnout because you're catching the first whispers of tension, not waiting until it becomes a full-blown storm. 4. Bringing it all together. Let's visualize a day when all these elements come together. You wake up after 7 solid hours of sleep. Your first thought is gratitude, because your dreams were undisturbed and you feel rested. You brew a cup of herbal tea, sit quietly for 5 minutes, and focus on the steam rising from your mug, gently warming your hands. You eat a breakfast of greens, fruit, and a protein source, maybe eggs or chia pudding, chewing deliberately, noticing each flavor. Then you head out for a 30-minute walk, watching the morning sunlight filter through the trees, breathing with intention the entire time. During your workday, you resist the urge to snack on chips. Instead, you opt for a handful of nuts or a piece of fruit. In the evening, instead of reaching for a soda, you prepare a simple stir-fry of vegetables and lean protein, mindful of ingredients. As bedtime approaches, you shut down all screens, read a few pages of a favorite book, and end the day with a short 5-minute breathing practice, sitting still, tuning into your body, and releasing any lingering tension. On days like these, you'll notice your mind feels lighter. Your thoughts flow more smoothly. You can tackle complex problems with a kind of quiet confidence. Your emotional reactivity softens because your body isn't fighting sugar crashes or exhaustion. You're not just surviving, you're thriving because you've built the foundation, a vessel that supports deep, clear, free-wing, courageous thinking. 5. Stoic wisdom, the integration of body and mind. Seneca, writing centuries ago, reminded us that the body exists to serve the mind. But that's not an excuse to neglect it. Rather, it's a call to honor it. When we treat our bodies like temples, feeding them nourishing food, giving them rest, moving them with purpose, and tuning into their signals, we create fertile ground for our minds to flourish. Da Vinci didn't draw in a frenzied haze. He sketched with steady hands, clear vision, and a lively curiosity honed by good health. Marcus Aurelius didn't lead an empire from an exhausted throne. He anchored his thoughts with morning reflections, mindful movement, and disciplined routines. Their brilliance wasn't separate from their physical habits. It was the natural fruit of them. 6. Your challenge, building your own vessel. So here's my challenge for you. This week, pick one pillar, diet, sleep, movement, or awareness, and commit to a simple, concrete change. Maybe you eliminate sodas and replace them with water or herbal tea. Maybe you set a firm screen curfew an hour before bed. Maybe you schedule a daily walk, regardless of weather, or maybe you start your day with just 3 minutes of breath-focused stillness. Track it. Notice how your mind responds. Write down any insights, mental clarity, emotional balance, physical energy. Each small habit might feel insignificant at first, but over time you'll build momentum. Your physical foundation will solidify, and your mind will sharpen like steel tempered in fire. In a world that constantly demands more hustle, more multitasking, more everything, choosing to care for your vessel is an act of profound self-respect. It's a Stoic's way of saying, I will cultivate strength, balance, and clarity today so that I may meet life's challenges with courage and wisdom tomorrow. Remember, the path to a sharp mind isn't a mental marathon alone. It's a lifelong dance between body and mind. Step onto that dance floor, eat well, sleep deeply, move joyfully, and listen to your body's whispers. In doing so, you honor the ancient wisdom of Stoics and Da Vinci alike, and you transform everyday habits into the bedrock of extraordinary thought. Have you ever looked at two things that seem completely unrelated and suddenly realized they share an unseen connection? Picture seashells scattered on a rugged mountaintop. At first glance, you wonder, how did shells end up here? That question, rooted in curiosity, leads you to a revelation. This land was once an ancient seafloor. That spark of insight linking seashells to shifting geology is exactly how geniuses think. They don't just consume facts, they build intuitive neural bridges between ideas that appear worlds apart. This ability to connect the unconnected isn't magic. It's a habit, a muscle you can train. Let's explore how you can cultivate this skill and then dive into the T-shaped model of learning, combining broad knowledge with deep expertise so you can approach problems from a place of principle, not just reaction. 1. Building intuitive links through curiosity. Imagine your mind as a grand library filled with books on every subject: history, art, physics, music, and more. But if you only ever read one shelf at a time, you'll miss the cross-genre treasures hidden on another. To build intuitive links, you need to ask questions that pull knowledge from multiple shelves. When Leonardo da Vinci found shells on mountainsides, he didn't simply accept them as odd artifacts. He asked, "What is this trying to tell me?" By connecting the shells to ancient seas, he saw patterns of time and transformation that others overlooked. You don't have to find seashells on a mountain to practice this. Today, when you learn something new, maybe a bit of psychology in a podcast, ask yourself, how might this concept apply to my work, my relationships, my daily routine? Over time, you'll notice patterns emerge. A study about decision-making in animals might spark an idea for human leadership. A mathematical formula might reveal an economic trend. The key is to nurture that wonder, to see every detail as a clue pointing to a larger map. Pro tip: keep a link journal. Whenever you encounter two seemingly separate ideas, like the rhythm of music and the pattern of the tides, write them down side by side. Then jot a quick note. Both ebb and flow, both require timing. This tiny habit trains your brain to create those neural bridges. 2. The T-shaped model, combining breadth and depth. Now let's talk T-shaped thinking, a framework that helps you leverage both wide-ranging knowledge, the top bar of the T, and deep expertise, the vertical stem. Imagine the letter T on a piece of paper. Across the top, you have breadth, a shallow understanding of many fields: economics, literature, biology, art. Down the stem, you have depth, a focused mastery of one domain, say, software engineering, cooking, or marketing. Breadth: when you know a little about many things, you can spot patterns that specialists in only one field might miss. Michael Jordan, for example, wasn't just an offensive powerhouse. He understood defense intimately. His broad view of the game, knowing how offenses operate, made him a relentless defender. Similarly, if you're a marketer who understands psychology, you'll craft campaigns that resonate at a deeper level. If you're an engineer who also studies design, you'll build products that are both efficient and beautiful. Depth: that deep expertise is your anchor. It gives you credibility and a strong foundation. But depth alone can become a well-decorated silo. A brilliant chemist who never studies history might innovate in a lab, but miss larger societal trends that could guide their research. A gifted writer who never explores science might craft beautiful prose yet overlook critical factual context. T-shaped thinkers bridge that gap. They use depth as the bedrock and breadth as the sky that expands their view. When you deeply understand one subject well enough to teach it to others, you're primed to apply its principles to novel contexts. The depth gives you confidence. The breadth gives you agility. Exercise: pick a topic you know deeply, maybe playing guitar. Now list 5 subjects you know a bit about, perhaps photography, psychology, coding, cooking, and astronomy. Ask, how can guitar lessons inform teaching photography? How might rhythm and music translate to pacing in a recipe? How can polynomial curves in coding inspire string bending techniques on a fretboard? By actively drawing lines between your deep skill and other fields, you transform your expertise into a platform for innovation. 3. Reframing problems through connection. Now that we've built the foundation, connecting boss and embracing T-shaped thinking, let's talk about reframing problems. The Stoics called this the art of perception, turning obstacles into tools. Marcus Aurelius wrote, The mind adapts and converts to its purposes the obstacle to our acting. When you see a problem not as a barrier, but as raw material for growth, you shift from reactive to proactive. Here's a simple habit. When frustration surfaces, maybe you miss a deadline or feel stuck on a project, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? Or what does this remind me of? That pause invites your mind to search through prior experiences. For example, if a server crashes on your website, you might think back to a time your car broke down. Both moments demanded quick thinking under pressure. That memory can guide you to calmly troubleshoot and communicate clearly, turning panic into problem solving. Real-world example. Let's say you're a chef learning about leadership for the first time. Most leadership courses focus on boardrooms or corporate teams, seemingly distant from a busy kitchen. But if you dig deeper, you'll see a chef's brigade operates on clear communication, precise timing, and mutual respect, all core leadership principles. By mapping leadership concepts onto the kitchen environment, you absorb leadership more naturally. And that cross-domain reframing accelerates your learning. When you finally step into a corporate role, you already know how to delegate, motivate, and handle heat, literally and figuratively. 4. Accelerating learning through cross-domain insight. When you commit to this reframing habit, you'll find that understanding one field deeply accelerates your ability to learn another. A poet who studies music can better write rhythms in verse. A chef who studies chemistry can innovate new cooking techniques. Someone who's navigated depression might become an empathetic counselor, translating personal insight into guidance for others. It's like having a toolkit. The more diverse your tools, the more creative your solutions. So, seek out experiences and knowledge outside your comfort zone. Read a biography of a leader in a field you know nothing about. Attend a workshop on ceramic art if you're an accountant. Listen to a podcast on astrophysics if you're a gardener. Each new perspective doesn't just add data, it reshapes your neural network. When you return to your primary field, you'll see old problems with fresh eyes, spotting a solution that others, trapped within a narrower frame, can't see. 5. Your next steps. Practicing connection and principle-based thinking daily. Reflection. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what surprising connection did I discover today? Write it down. Maybe you noticed that a traffic jam mirrored a data backlog, or that the emotions in a novel reflected project dynamics at work. By recording these insights, you reinforce your brain's habit of connecting. 1 terrain exercise. Pick a subject you know well, like running errands, and explore a tangential field, like project management. How does planning your grocery list resemble running a project timeline? Draw a quick mind map linking the two. Obstacle is opportunity. Next time you hit a snag, your code crashes, your bike chain slips, pause and ask, what is this obstacle teaching me? That reframes frustration into curiosity and curiosity into growth. Cross-domain challenge. Find someone in a completely different profession, maybe a musician if you're an engineer, and ask them about their problem-solving techniques. Swap tips. You'll quickly see how a musician's approach to improvisation can inspire new ways to debug code, and vice versa. 6. The Stoic mindset. Embodying connections and principles. Stoic philosophers didn't separate disciplines. They believed in the unity of wisdom. Seneca advised, associate with people who are likely to improve you. In other words, immerse yourself in diverse fields and viewpoints. Marcus Aurelius didn't just write about virtue, he observed nature's cycles, examined his own leadership in war, and learned from every human interaction. That integration, seeing life as a network of principles rather than isolated events, is the bedrock of Stoic practice. When you build intuitive links, embrace T-shaped thinking, and reframe problems through connections, you embody Stoic wisdom in action. You don't simply react to challenges, you transform them. You don't gather information to check a box. You weave it into a living tapestry of understanding. And as you do, you'll find that even in a world of chaos, your mind remains sharp, nimbly crafting insights that guide you toward purpose and resilience. So today, let your mind roam freely. Notice the surprising correlations in your day, how a melody in your favorite song echoes in the pattern of your thoughts. Sketch a quick mind map on a napkin when ideas flood. And when frustration strikes, pause and ask, what is this moment teaching me? Over time, these habits become second nature, forging a brain wired for depth, creativity, and connection. And when you live with that kind of integration, you don't just survive life's storms. You navigate them with the quiet confidence of a true Stoic warrior of the mind. Have you ever woken up to a day that feels like a succession of punches to the gut? Maybe you get a flat tire on your way to work, only to find yourself stuck in traffic, and then your boss reprimands you for a missed deadline. You walk into the office and discover a surprise downpour, and by the time you get home, you're met with yet another family argument. When life delivers a day like this, it's easy to feel like a victim, trapped in a storm without an umbrella. But what if we could see each of these challenges as a forge, a practice ground where our character, resilience, and wisdom are sharpened? That, my friends, is the Stoic way. Using hardship not as a roadblock, but as a training session. Let's explore how viewing adversity as an opportunity can transform your mind into something stronger and more resilient. 1. Viewing hardship as the forge of character. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, reminded us that difficulties show a person's character. So when trouble comes, think of yourself as a wrestler whom God, like a trainer, has paired with a tough young man. Imagine you're that wrestler. The tough young man that you're paired with isn't an enemy. He's your training partner. Every time he pushes you to the edge, you learn how to brace yourself, how to hold your ground, and how to strike back with greater skill. Life's trials, flat tires, unexpected criticism, sudden setbacks are not there to crush you, but to test and refine the qualities you need: patience, self-control, and optimism in discomfort. Let's break that down into a daily practice. When your car stalls on the highway or a coworker's harsh words sting, instead of freaking out, pause for a moment. In that pause, tell yourself, time for patience practice. Feel the grip on your steering wheel or the tightness in your chest. Recognize that this is not a meaningless inconvenience. It's a chance to train your mind. You can choose to lean into frustration, or you can lean into the lesson. Ask yourself, what is this challenge teaching me right now? Maybe it's teaching you to speak calmly under pressure. Maybe it's testing how you keep moving forward when things go wrong. By labeling moments like these as training sessions, you rewire your brain to see hardship not as punishment, but as the furnace where inner strength is forged. 2. Reframing daily nuisances as mental workouts. Let's take a closer look at those everyday irritations. A flat tire, judgmental bosses, unexpected rain, family disputes. On the surface, they're nuisances, interruptions to our plans. But underneath, each holds a lesson in Stoic resilience. Flat tire. Instead of swearing at the wheel, consider that this moment gives you practice in acceptance and problem solving. You can't change the fact that your tire is flat. You can only choose how to respond. Use the time waiting for a tow to practice calm breathing or plan the next steps. Call a friend, find a shop, and keep your mind from spiraling into why me. Boss's criticism. A sharp word or a harsh email can sting like a bee, but that sting invites you to practice self-control. Do you retaliate with a snappy reply, or do you pause, reflect, and respond with reasoned clarity? Practice listening to the critique, sifting the truth from the emotion, and responding not from ego, but from principle. When you're unprepared, at first you're inconvenienced, your umbrella left at home, your shoes soaked, but you can treat it as a chance to practice adaptability. Maybe you find yourself laughing at the absurdity of running down a sidewalk, water sloshing. That laughter is a weapon against despair. It reminds you that even when external conditions go sideways, you can choose to find a spark of delight. Family disputes. When someone at home argues or lashes out, it's easy to match anger with anger. But that's precisely the moment to practice empathy and equanimity. You can ask, is it worth elevating the conflict? Can I practice listening more deeply and responding with compassion rather than reactivity? Each of these moments is like lifting a mental weight. You get stronger with every rep, every passing trial. Over time, the muscle of your mind becomes so conditioned that when a genuinely serious crisis strikes, you don't collapse. You rise. That's the power of viewing hardship as a forge. 3. Examples of growth through adversity. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle in action. A friend of mine, Sarah, owned a cozy little cafe in town. For years, it was her passion project, a place where neighbors gathered, where she poured her heart into every latte and pastry. Then the pandemic hit like a sledgehammer. Her cafe, like so many others, was forced to shut down. Rent didn't stop, bills piled up, and employees needed paychecks. Many would see this as just crushing. They'd close shop and move on. But Sarah did something different. She treated the closure as her tough wrestling partner. She spent weeks studying every mistake. Was her financial model too tight? Did she rely too heavily on daily foot traffic? Were her supply chains too fragile? Sarah pored over articles on food delivery logistics, scanned books on restaurant management, and even took online classes on small business resilience. That period of forced reflection was painful, but it was also a crucible. When restrictions eased, she didn't just reopen the same cafe, she reopened as a franchise. She had systems in place, backup suppliers, a digital ordering platform, and a leaner, more adaptable team. Her new cafe was stronger, more resilient, and ready to weather future storms. If she had seen that pandemic only as a catastrophe, she might have shut her doors forever. Instead, she treated it as a mentor. But it doesn't have to be a grand event like a pandemic to teach you something powerful. Even small daily reframes can transform your life. Let's say you spill coffee on your shirt before an important meeting. Instead of cursing, you could think, well, this is reminding me that imperfections are part of life. I can't control every detail, but I can show up anyway. That moment of grace, choosing purpose over perfection, is training your mind to act from principle, not panic. 4. Creating your own mental gym. So how do you make this a habit? Here are some steps you can start today. Label your challenges. Whenever something goes wrong, a deadline slips, a loved one snaps, your treadmill breaks, quietly whisper to yourself, time for a training session. That label reframes frustration into the anticipation of growth. Ask probing questions. When faced with difficulty, don't just stew. Ask, what is this trying to teach me? Or, how can I use this obstacle as a stepping stone? Maybe you'll learn patience, or the importance of backup plans, or how to remain calm under criticism. Celebrate small victories. Each time you respond to a challenge with composure rather than frenzy, give yourself a mental high five. Celebrate that sweet moment when you choose self-control over reactive anger. Those small wins accumulate, building a foundation for bigger victories. Keep a training log. At the end of each day, write down one adversity you faced and one lesson you extracted. Over time, you'll see patterns. You'll spot recurring themes. Maybe you're always challenged by tight schedules or frequent interruptions or unhelpful feedback. By tracking these moments, you can anticipate them and build strategies in advance, refining your mindset like an athlete honing a skill. Practice visualization. Before you go into a challenging situation, a tough conversation, a job interview, a competitive event, take a moment to imagine the potential obstacles. See your inner wrestler pushing you. Visualize yourself responding with patience, clarity, and calm determination. When the real moment arrives, your mind will have a blueprint for turning adversity into a training ground. 5. Why this matters for you. In today's world, adversity is not an anomaly. It's a constant. Economic downturns, global crises, personal struggles, they're part of the human landscape. If your first instinct is to run from every hardship, you'll find yourself forever on the back foot, exhausted and discouraged. But if you learn to see every challenge as a forge, a chance to develop patience, self-control, optimism, and courage, you'll cultivate a mind that's not just reactive, but proactive. You'll be the person who stands strong when chaos hits, who can calmly navigate uncertainty, who can turn pain into purpose. Remember, the Stoics didn't promise us a life without trouble. They promised us the tools to transform trouble. Epictetus' mighty wrestler is you. Every flat tire, every critical email, every downpour, every family argument is that training partner. Embrace them. Let them push you to become an Olympic-class version of yourself. When you see hardship as your forge, you stop being brittle under pressure. You become steel, flexible enough to bend, strong enough to stand, and unbreakable in your resolve. So the next time life throws you off balance, whisper, "This is my chance to train." Then take a deep breath, square your shoulders, and step into the ring. Your mind, sharpened by fire, will emerge more resilient, wiser, and ready for whatever comes next. Have you ever scrolled through your LinkedIn feed, bookmarked a dozen motivational quotes, or sped through a podcast hoping to absorb wisdom, only to find a few days later that nothing has really changed? We live in an age of instant consumption, 10-second sound bites, 20 highlight tweets, bite-sized book summaries we devour and forget. But the Stoics warned us, consuming information without reflection is like filling a sponge with water and never squeezing it out. Real growth comes when we let ideas sink in, challenge us, and reshape our actions. Let's talk about the difference between merely consuming content and engaging in genuine transformation, between skimming answers and living with questions. Then we'll explore how to choose books that truly stretch our minds, how to read so that each sentence becomes a mirror reflecting our own blind spots, and how to cultivate intentional study that leads to lasting change. 1. Information consumption was real growth. Picture this. You spend 30 minutes speed reading a best-selling personal development book, highlighting passages, and texting your friend, "This stuff is gold." But later, when that same coworker criticizes you, you revert to your same reactive pattern, snapping defensively, avoiding accountability. Why? Because you never gave your mind time to wrestle with the ideas. You treated consuming as if it were the same as transforming. A true Stoic doesn't read to collect quotes. They read to live better. Every sentence becomes a question. Am I applying this? Where am I still off track? If the words don't force you to pause and face your own faults, they remain lifeless ink. So before you jump into the next viral listicle or hit play on a new TED Talk, ask yourself, am I looking for a quick hit of inspiration? Or am I seeking a lasting shift in how I live? If it's the latter, you need deeper methods, practices that turn reading into a conversation with yourself. Let's dive into how to do that. 2. Criteria for meaningful reading. Not all books are created equal. Some are fluffy picks that boost your ego. I read 30 books this year, but leave you empty when tested. The Stoics urged us to choose readings that unsettle us, that challenge the beliefs we cling to for comfort. Here are some examples of books that have done just that. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor's private journal, forcing him, and now you, to confront mortality, duty, and the fleeting nature of success. Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday, a modern guide to quieting the mind, demanding you examine your addiction to busyness. The Road to Character by David Brooks, a raw look at moral humility, pushing you to question what values you've buried under self-promotion. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, a piercing reminder that ego can derail any achievement and that humility often precedes true greatness. Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, a psychological exploration that shatters the illusion of rational thought, exposing countless biases we never suspected. Deep Work by Cal Newport, an argument for focused intensity in a distracted world, a challenge to your multitasking habits. Atomic Habits by James Clear, a blueprint for lasting change, but only if you are willing to practice tiny, consistent shifts rather than chase quick fixes. Each of these titles requires more than passive reading. They demand curiosity. Do I really live this way? Am I comfortable at the expense of my own growth? If a book doesn't make you squirm in recognition, set it aside. You want books that deliver a gentle shove or a firm push towards self-examination. 3. Reading practice. From surface to depth, reading moves slowly is the first most radical step. Try this. Choose one challenging passage, maybe a difficult paragraph in Thinking, Fast and Slow, or a terse entry in Meditations, and read it aloud. Ask yourself, does this change my behavior? How will I act differently tomorrow because of these words? Jot down your answers in a notebook. That physical act of writing, paired with spoken reflection, roots the idea in your mind and in your life. Next, experiment with rewriting ideas from the opposite perspective. If ego is the enemy tells you to let go of pride, spend a few minutes writing why pride might sometimes be useful. This doesn't mean embracing arrogance. It means ensuring you really understand the original argument. By arguing both sides, you force deeper comprehension. You're not simply memorizing, you're testing the idea in the crucible of your own mind. Finally, teach what you're learning to someone else. Explain a complex idea like the concept of deep work or Marcus Aurelius' view of impermanence to a friend or family member in plain language. If you can't explain it simply, chances are you only skim the surface. Teaching forces you to sharpen your understanding and expose any gaps in your knowledge. 4. Prioritizing depth over breadth. In our culture of hustle, it's easy to become an inspiration junkie, constantly chasing the next conference, podcast, or self-improvement guru. But as the Stoics would remind us, variety without integration breeds confusion. Instead of reading 10 books half-heartedly, choose one book and go deep. Spend a week or a month wrestling with its lessons. If your spouse asks why you're still on meditations 2 weeks later, smile and say, some sentences demand a lifetime to master. Depth doesn't mean refusing any other input. It means giving each idea the respect of sustained engagement. When you read Atomic Habits, don't skim chapter summaries. Apply each tiny habit, journal its effects, and share your progress with someone else. That's depth. It's feeling the friction between theory and practice and leaning into that friction until it transforms your routine. 5. Putting it all together. So here's your action plan for meaningful reading. Choose a book that challenges you. Pick one title from the recommended list that feels uncomfortable. Perhaps The Road to Character if you've been coasting on external achievements. Read slowly with purpose. Block off 30 minutes free from distractions. Read one section. Highlight a sentence that cuts to the bone. Then close the book and ask, how will I live differently today because of this? Write your answer. Rewrite from both sides. Take that highlighted passage and rewrite it from the opposite viewpoint. If it argues for humility, write why humility might sometimes hold you back. This practice solidifies the original lesson. Teach it. Text a friend, record a quick voice memo, or sit across from a family member and try explaining the concept. Speak as if teaching a beginner. Notice where you stumble. That's where you need more reflection. Journal your impact. Each evening ask Wolfgang, what did I learn? How did I act differently? Over weeks, you'll see patterns. I held my tongue instead of lashing out, or I paused before scrolling social media. These small shifts are the fruit of deep reading. 6. The Stoic Edge. The Stoics didn't read to rack up credentials. They read to refine their souls. Seneca urged us to see every sentence as a mirror, revealing our blind spots. Epictetus insisted that only when we live by our reading do we earn true wisdom. If you finish Meditations and nothing in your life changes, no extra kindness, no deeper patience, no humbler spirit, then you've missed the point. The book hasn't been transformed. It has transformed nothing. In a world brimming with distractions, choose the path of intentional study. Let your reading be a conversation, a battleground, and a forge for a sharper mind and a calmer heart. Read not to appear wise. Read to live wisely, even when it's uncomfortable. And remember, depth over breadth, questions over answers, transformation over consumption. When you practice this, you won't just accumulate content, you'll cultivate character. Welcome to the journey of genuine growth. Have you ever caught yourself frantically scrolling through your phone while waiting for a red light to turn green? Or maybe you've used washing dishes as an excuse to avoid thinking about that looming deadline. Here's a radical thought. Those little pauses, those moments of stillness, are not dead time. They're hidden opportunities to gain clarity, to listen to the quiet voice inside, and to ask yourself what truly matters. Imagine you're standing at a stoplight. The world around you is buzzing, engines revving, horns honking, people rushing. Yet in that brief pause, you have a chance to breathe deeply, observe your surroundings, and notice how your body feels. Are you holding tension in your shoulders? Is your mind racing through a to-do list? That single moment of intentional stillness can be a doorway to presence. Instead of immediately checking emails, try this. Close your eyes for 5 seconds, take a slow, deliberate breath, and ask, what is the most important thing I need to remember right now? You might be surprised how that tiny pause sharpens your focus and recenters you. Now let's take this a step further. Commit to a weekly ritual of 2 uninterrupted hours. No phone, no computer, no music, no talking. For some of us, that sounds impossible. Our minds scream, but what if I miss something important? Here's where Stoic practice comes in. Seneca wrote that, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Most of our anxiety about silence is manufactured. When you finally sit alone, maybe walking a quiet trail, jotting thoughts in a journal, or simply sitting on a park bench, you'll notice resistance at first. Your mind will want to wander, jump back to tasks, or replay a stressful email. That resistance is the mind's way of clinging to noise, to avoid facing the unknown territory of your own thoughts. But if you persist, something remarkable happens. In that stillness, questions rise to the surface. Is the path I'm on truly aligned with my values? Am I chasing something because it matters to my heart, or just because everyone else is doing it? Without distractions, you begin to see patterns, habits you never questioned, goals you adopted by default, fears you never named. That kind of self-awareness is the bedrock of meaningful change. Think of it like polishing a mirror. Our inner reflections are clouded by endless noise, social media notifications, news alerts, frantic to-do lists. When you carve out intentional stillness, you wipe away that dust. Suddenly you see yourself clearly, your strengths, your shortcomings, and the values that quietly guide you. And when you see clearly, you can choose actions that resonate with that authentic self, rather than simply reacting to the world around you. So this week, try it. The next time you're washing dishes or stuck in traffic, pause and breathe. Ask yourself a question that has weight. What am I avoiding by staying busy? Or, what does my heart really need right now? And once a week, carve out 2 hours just for yourself. Sit in silence. Walk without a destination. Journal without an agenda. Yes, it may feel uncomfortable, like standing still in a river while currents tug at your legs. But that very tension is where transformation happens. In those quiet stretches, you reclaim control over your mind. You stop being buffeted by every passing thought and start living with intentional presence. Remember, the loudest voice you will ever hear is your own. When you tune out the world's noise, even for a few minutes, you'll hear your true priorities, your deepest convictions, and the wisdom that's been waiting patiently in your heart. Embrace those moments of stillness. Let them reveal what truly matters. Because in silence, you don't just quiet the chaos. You discover the clarity to live stronger, wiser, and more authentically. Have you ever felt like your life is a calm pond, smooth, predictable, but strangely stagnant? It's comfortable, yes, but that very comfort slowly dulls your adaptability. Stoic wisdom reminds us that real growth happens when we intentionally step into discomfort, when we leave the comfort pond and dive into uncharted waters. Today, let's explore simple ways to design gentle challenges that stretch our capabilities and uncover the hidden potential waiting just beyond our comfort zones. 1. Join a group where you're the least experienced. Think back to the last time you felt out of your depth, maybe in a training course or a social circle full of experts. At first, the discomfort can be unsettling. You worry about making mistakes or looking foolish. But that's exactly the point. When you surround yourself with people who know more than you do, perhaps enrolling in a local photography club if you've never held a camera, or attending a coding workshop when your coding skills are minimal, you create a living classroom for accelerated learning. You'll absorb new techniques, pick up vocabulary you'd never encounter otherwise, and discover questions you didn't even know existed. Over weeks, your initial anxiety gives way to curious engagement. You'll surprise yourself with how quickly you learn when you're forced to adapt. 2. Learn a skill outside your natural aptitude. Are you a writer who shies away from anything visual? Or maybe you're an introvert who trembles at the idea of public speaking? Embrace a skill that doesn't come naturally. For a writer, that might mean taking a basic graphic design class, learning to use a simple layout tool so you can design a blog header or a podcast cover. Yes, those first designs will look amateurish, but each misstep teaches you about balance, color, and typography. Lessons that will also sharpen your eye for descriptive language and narrative flow. If you're an introvert, sign up for a local Toastmasters meeting or volunteer to lead a small team discussion. You don't need to deliver a flawless TED Talk. Instead, see each presentation, however brief, as a micro-challenge, a chance to practice projecting your voice, organizing thoughts on the fly, and tolerating the jittery feeling in your stomach. Over time, that discomfort becomes familiar. You still feel the butterflies, but you also feel the thrill of conquering fear. And that confidence spills into every part of your life. 3. Engage deeply with people holding opposite beliefs. We tend to retreat into echo chambers, surrounding ourselves with like-minded friends, following social feeds that reinforce our opinions. Stoicism teaches us to welcome differing perspectives, not to argue for the sake of argument, but to genuinely understand where another person is coming from. Instead of closing your ears when someone voices an unfamiliar view, lean in and ask questions. Tell me why you feel that way, or what experiences shaped your perspective. That simple act of listening dissolves preconceived judgments and forces you to grapple with ideas that challenge your assumptions. You may never adopt their position wholesale, but you'll gain empathy, nuance, and a more sober view of your own convictions. The next time you debate, you'll speak from a place of understanding rather than defensive reflex. 4. Why this matters. Each of these challenges, joining a new group, learning an unfamiliar skill, or seeking out opposing viewpoints, feels like a leap into the unknown. It hurts your ego. It tests your patience. But it also forges new neural pathways, builds confidence, and reveals strengths you never knew you had. Just like a muscle grows stronger under resistance, your mind and character expand when you step into discomfort. So here's your invitation. This week, pick one manageable challenge that stretches you. It could be as simple as attending a meetup where you know no one, signing up for a short online course in a skill you've avoided, or having a sincere conversation with someone whose beliefs differ from yours. Feel the initial sting of discomfort. Notice how your heart races. Then watch as day by day that sting becomes a familiar hum, the hum of growth. In the words of Seneca, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. Step out of the comfort pond, embrace the unfamiliar, and watch your life swell with new energy, new insights, and a deeper resilience you never thought possible. Have you ever wondered what you're missing because you're too proud to ask? Imagine walking into your boss's office and simply saying, "Where am I falling short?" That question may feel like standing naked in a crowded room, vulnerable, even risky. But it's precisely through that vulnerability that we discover the blind spots clouding our growth. In Stoic philosophy, self-awareness is the first step toward a true mastery. By seeking honest feedback, we force ourselves to confront assumptions we didn't even know we had. Think about the last time a friend said, "You always," or "You never," something that stung because it rang true. Maybe they told you your impatience drains their energy, or that you dominate conversations without realizing it. At first, you bristle. Who are they to judge me? But if you pause, you might see that their words are a mirror reflecting a hidden side of yourself. When you ask someone you trust, "What traits of mine exhaust you?" you're not fishing for compliments. You're hunting for truth. You're saying, "I want to see myself as clearly as possible, even if it hurts." That honest feedback shifts you from autopilot to awareness. Suddenly, you're no longer trapped in stale assumptions about how you are or what you can't do. Instead, you're holding a torch to the corners of your own mind, illuminating areas you never knew needed attention. I once had a colleague, Sarah, who believed she was an excellent team player. She prided herself on supporting others and never speaking out of turn. But when she asked her teammates, "Where can I improve?" she discovered she often interrupted people in meetings, her enthusiasm masked as helpful interjections. The moment she heard that, she felt a sting, followed by gratitude. She began practicing active listening, letting colleagues finish their thoughts before she spoke, and asking clarifying questions instead of assuming she already knew their point. That honest feedback didn't crush her, it sharpened her. Now imagine layering these moments of candid feedback over time, and what happens to your nervous system. At first, each honest critique feels like a punch to the gut. Your fast-thinking, survival-driven brain floods with adrenaline. Are they attacking me? Am I worthless? But if you train yourself to welcome that sting, you begin rewiring your response from fear to curiosity. Your heartbeat steadies. Instead of lashing out or shutting down, you lean in and ask, "Tell me more." Over weeks and months, that sustained challenge shifts your nervous system from reactive survival mode to adaptive growth mode, where once you bristled at criticism, you now see it as fuel for improvement. To accelerate this transformation, seek out mentors or individuals you admire and meet with them regularly. Imagine scheduling a monthly check-in with a senior leader, a trusted friend, or even someone you describe as ahead in your field. In those meetings, ask blunt, Stoic-inspired questions. What's my biggest blind spot? Where do I waste my energy? You're not there to flatter them. You're there to collide your raw edges with their seasoned wisdom. Each collision reveals burrs you didn't know were snagging your progress. It's like holding a rough stone under a magnifying glass. Those sharp edges become visible only under intense scrutiny. Over time, these collisions recalibrate your default mode. Instead of waiting for danger to knock you out, you learn to anticipate obstacles and adapt your strategy. Criticism becomes less of a threat and more of a diagnostic tool. Great, now I know where to put in the work. You begin to crave feedback, not shy away from it. That's when fear gives way to curiosity, and you realize that discomfort is the price of mastery. So here is your invitation. Identify one person this week, boss, friend, mentor, who will give you unfiltered feedback. Frame it with courage. I'm committed to getting better. Please tell me where I'm falling short. Then sit with the discomfort. Notice how your mind recoils, how your heart races. But keep breathing. Ask follow-up questions. Write down what you learn. Treat each critique like a forge, hammering you into a sharper, more resilient version of yourself. And once a month, schedule a collision session with someone you respect. It could be a mentor at work, a teacher in your community, or a friend whose honesty is as unwavering as a Stoic's. Ask them, what trait of mine holds me back? Let their candor guide you toward areas you never thought to explore. Over time, you'll notice your emotional defense mechanisms loosening, your nervous system shifting from fight or flight to observe and adapt. Criticism won't feel like a threat because you'll know how to extract its wisdom. In the quiet moments after each session, pause and journal. What did I learn? How will I change? Where will I focus my effort this week? Those entries become a roadmap of your transformation. Proof that sustained challenge rewires your fears into adaptive strength. So step into the forge of honest feedback. Embrace that initial sting. Seek out those monthly collisions. And watch as your mind, once trapped by assumptions, expands into new territory. Resilient, curious, and infinitely sharper. Have you ever ended a hectic day and wondered, did I really understand why I acted that way? Most of us live on autopilot, chasing deadlines, scrolling social feeds, or juggling responsibilities, rarely stopping to ask the most important question. Do I truly know who I am right now? Tonight, let's explore a Stoic practice that can transform your life, the nightly mirror of self-reflection. By gently questioning our motives and observing ourselves with the objectivity of a third person, we sharpen not only our minds, but our character. 1. The power of the nightly mirror. Imagine this. You sit at your kitchen table after dinner, the world outside your window fading into dusk. You close your laptop, put your phone face down, and take a deep breath. In that moment of stillness, ask yourself, what decisions did I make today because of fear rather than wisdom? Which actions were driven by ego rather than virtue? This habitual pause, this nightly mirror, allows you to step outside the swirl of thoughts and view your day like a movie. You see your reactions, your successes, and your stumbles, all with a clear, compassionate gaze. Say you snapped at a coworker this afternoon. In the heat of the moment, it felt justified. They were wrong, so I had to defend myself. But when you reflect at night, you might notice a different truth. Maybe you were tired or insecure about your own performance. That realization is not meant to punish you, it's meant to guide you. The Stoics believed that self-awareness is the root of self-mastery. If you can recognize the fear or ego that drove a poor decision, you can choose differently tomorrow. 2. Self-criticism versus self-compassion. Here's where balance matters. Self-criticism without kindness becomes self-flagellation, a recipe for shame and despair. Yet blind self-compassion can blind you to needed change, allowing bad habits to fester. The Stoic stance is one of firm, honest observation. Acknowledge your missteps, but don't drown in guilt. Ask, which version of myself made that choice? Was it the anxious self seeking validation, or the prideful self craving control? By naming the inner driver, whether fear, arrogance, or distraction, you detach from the identity that caused harm. In that detachment lies freedom. You're not a failure, you're a person with transient impulses. For instance, if you skipped your morning run because you told yourself, I'm too tired, ask, which part of me truly made that decision? The version that craves comfort or the one that fears discomfort? When you identify the comfort-seeking impulse, you can offer a gentle counterpoint. I see you want to rest, but remember how much better I feel after exercise. That act of compassion and honesty reshapes behavior over time. 3. Third-person observation, recording yourself. To deepen this practice, try the Stoic equivalent of stepping behind the curtain. Record yourself giving a presentation or simply talking through a complex problem. Then watch or listen as if you're studying a stranger. Notice if you ramble, repeat the same points, or stumble over phrases. Maybe you catch yourself using filler words, more often than you realized. That's your anxious self overriding the calm, rational self. By witnessing these patterns without judgment, you transform them into data points for growth. Let's say you recorded a video update for your team. On playback, you notice you spent 5 minutes justifying minor delays instead of focusing on solutions. In that moment, you say to yourself, my defensive self was afraid of appearing incompetent. That insight lets you craft a new approach. Next time, cut to the chase, state the problem clearly, and propose a fix. Over weeks, that shift can remake how you communicate under pressure. 4. Making self-reflection a habit. This nightly mirror doesn't have to be a burdensome ritual. Start small. Before bed, jot down one moment you handled well and one moment you wish you'd handled differently. Ask, what motivated me in each case? What does that reveal? Over time, you'll build an internal archive of patterns, recognizing that fear drives some choices, while integrity guides others. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up, if thou wilt ever dig. Commit to just 5 minutes each evening. Sit in silence, breathe deeply, and turn your gaze inward. Hold up that metaphorical mirror. As the day's events flicker through your mind, small victories, awkward exchanges, moments where your heart raced, observe yourself without blame. Notice how consistent practice turns raw self-observation into inner intelligence. You'll discover that understanding your own motives not only diffuses stress, but also sharpens your decisions, calibrates your values, and roots you more fully in each moment. Closing invitation. Tonight, after the world quiets down, give yourself the gift of reflection. Shut off the distractions. TV, phone, notifications, and look honestly at your day. Ask the tough questions. Did I act from wisdom or from impulse? Where did I let fear or ego lead? Then offer yourself the gentle compassion to learn and grow. In that fusion of self-criticism and self-compassion, you forge a resilient inner intelligence. Over time, that inner intelligence becomes your guiding star, lighting the path from confusion to clarity and from reaction to purposeful action. Remember, the Stoic journey isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Each night's reflection brings you one step closer to living not as a passenger carried by circumstance, but as a captain steering by the stars of your deepest values. So tonight, stand before your mirror, internal or external, and meet the person you are with courage, kindness, and the unwavering determination to know yourself more deeply every day. Have you ever wondered why, after a long week of hard work, you still feel stuck in the same patterns? You might be running on autopilot, acting out of habit in blind spots you can't see on your own. The Stoics teach us that the opinions of others can be like a mirror, reflecting parts of ourselves we overlook. Let's talk about how to harness that feedback for genuine growth, and why many of us fear looking inward, and why we must do it anyway. 1. Feedback from others, illuminating blind spots. Imagine the 3 different coworkers telling you don't really listen, or you jump to conclusions. At first it stings. Listening is something you thought you did well. But hear this, when multiple people point to the same habit, struggling to really hear others, it's a clear signal. That's a blind spot. In Stoic terms, blind spots are like cracks in a ship's hull. You can sail for a while, but eventually water rushes in. By asking for honest feedback, where am I falling short? You confront those cracks before they swamp your ship. How do you filter this feedback without letting it overwhelm you? Think of it as a sieve. You don't swallow every comment or rejection at face value, but you don't ignore them either. Instead, you sift through who's giving the feedback. What's their perspective? Is there a pattern? If 3 people say you interrupt conversations, that pattern demands attention. Don't react defensively. Instead, probe gently. Can you give me an example? That request doesn't just clarify their viewpoint. It demonstrates humility and invites a deeper, more constructive conversation. Over time, this habit of selective filtering creates objective growth. You learn to accept constructive criticism without letting it erode your self-worth. Each truth you uncover becomes a tool, like a chisel, that chips away at arrogance or ignorance. You gradually replace assumptions with insights, leading to real improvement in how you communicate, lead, and connect. 2. The fear of introspection, sitting alone with your thoughts. Now let's turn inward. Stoics believe that the greatest danger isn't external chaos, it's an unexamined mind. Have you ever felt uneasy when your world goes quiet, say, late at night when everyone's asleep? That uneasy feeling isn't boredom, it's fear, a fear of confronting your own thoughts. What happens if you sit alone, without distraction, and truly look at your motivations, regrets, or fears? Many of us turn on the TV, scroll our phones, or busy ourselves with chores to avoid that confrontation. Yet the Stoic path offers a powerful truth. The strongest person is the one who can sit alone without fear. In those quiet moments, you discover the inner intelligence that underpins every skill: clarity of purpose, emotional resilience, and moral integrity. Reflection isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. When you skip it, you're like a plant grown in the dark. You may survive, but you won't thrive. Start small, dedicate just 5 minutes each evening to sit in silence. Turn off your phone, close your eyes, and ask a simple question. Why did I react that way today? What drove my decisions? Don't judge or scold yourself. Observe as if you're a detached scientist, noting fear-driven impulses, ego-driven boasts, or moments of genuine courage. That act of self-observation births inner intelligence. You begin to understand why you act as you do, and you gain the power to choose differently next time. 3. Creating a balanced practice. Combine the feedback you gather from others with your own nightly reflection. Suppose your friend says, "You tend to speak over me when I'm upset." That feedback stings, but you record it. Later in solitude, you ask, why did I speak over them? Was I afraid of their anger? In this loop, others' perspectives revealing your blind spots, and your own silence revealing underlying motives. You forge a cycle of continuous growth. Fear no longer holds you back. Curiosity drives you forward. So here's your challenge. Schedule a brief check-in with a trusted colleague or friend this week. Ask, what's one way I can improve? Listen without interrupting. Then that evening, carve out 5 minutes of quiet. Sit in stillness, breathe, and reflect on how you responded to their feedback. Ask yourself which version of you, fearful, arrogant, or driven, stepped forward today. Remember Marcus Aurelius' words, look within, within is the fountain of good. By embracing feedback from others and diving fearlessly into introspection, you tap into that fountain. You transform from someone buffeted by outside opinions into someone guided by inner wisdom. And as your inner intelligence grows, fed by honest feedback and fearless reflection, you'll not only survive life's storms, you'll navigate them with clarity, courage, and calm. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you knew exactly what was right, but you froze, remained silent, or did the easy thing instead of the right thing? Maybe a colleague in a meeting made a misleading statement and you hesitated to call it out. Or you felt the urge to respond with anger to a disrespectful email, but instead let the resentment fester. These are moments when our internal compass, our sense of virtue, either guides us forward or leaves us drifting in confusion. Ancient Stoics believed that living by virtue isn't an abstract ideal reserved for philosophers. It's the practical compass that keeps us oriented in daily life. Let's explore these cardinal Stoic virtues, justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage, and see how they can serve as our North Star when the world around us spins out of control. In the process, you'll discover how pausing for a moment of reflection, asking, is this aligned with virtue, can transform your decisions, reshape your character, and anchor you in a life of purpose. 1. Justice, the everyday bulwark. When we hear the word justice, we often think of courtrooms, judges' gavel knocks, or grand social movements. But at its root, justice in Stoic philosophy simply means treating others fairly, seeing them as fellow human beings with intrinsic dignity. Justice isn't only about laws or big moral judgments, it's about everyday ethics, the small decisions that reveal whether we truly value others. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague presents false data to make their project look better. Most of us would feel uncomfortable calling it out. There's a part of us worried about office politics, about standing alone. But justice demands that we speak up, not because we want to be a hero, but because fairness matters. If we allow misinformation to stand, we enable deception to spread. By pausing and asking, is it fair to stay silent, we align our choices with justice. On the other hand, justice also means recognizing the humanity of those we disagree with. If a friend confides a mistake, justice encourages us to respond with empathy, not judgment. In doing so, we create a culture of trust, where people feel valued even when they err. That simple act of listening, without lecturing or blaming, is justice in motion. When we orient our interactions around fairness rather than convenience, we anchor our relationships in mutual respect. Practice tip. Next time you notice someone being treated unfairly, whether at work, in your social circle, or online, ask yourself, what would justice look like here? That question, though brief, can spark a powerful shift, nudging you toward fairness even when it's easier to turn away. 2. Wisdom, discernment amid chaos. Wisdom, in Stoic terms, isn't the same as intelligence or knowledge. It's the capacity to discern what is within our control and what is not, and then act accordingly. Picture a tense family argument where emotions flare and accusations fly. You want to respond immediately to defend your position and win the debate. But wisdom says, pause. Take that split second to ask, can I change what just happened, or can I only choose my response? Often the thing we truly control is our own attitude and our own choice to remain calm. By recognizing that the argument's initial emotion lies outside our control, we stop fueling the fire and instead bring clarity to the situation. 5. Virtue as our daily guide. Now imagine beginning every day or pausing before each major decision and asking, is this aligned with justice, temperance, wisdom, and courage. That simple practice creates a moment of clarity, a chance to reorient before our impulses take hold. At first, you'll need to ask more often, while waiting in line, before sending a text, or when a tough email arrives. Over time, those questions become ingrained. You start to feel an intuitive tug, a sense that a particular action violates one of those virtues. That's habit stepping in. Virtue no longer feels like an external rule, but becomes an internal guide, an unspoken dialogue pointing you toward integrity. In times of crisis, when emotions whirl like a storm, virtue becomes our stable North Star. Imagine standing at the edge of a canyon in a thunderstorm, winds howling. Without a compass, you'd stumble. But if you hold a lantern fueled by virtue, each step becomes purposeful, each maneuver guided by your inner flame. Even when all else seems chaotic, you remain anchored in justice, certain of your direction, and confident in your character. 6. Bringing virtue into every moment. So how do you translate these 4 cardinal virtues into daily practice? Try this simple framework. Justice check. In every conversation or decision, ask, is this fair to everyone involved? If you're about to negotiate a raise, consider your employer's position as well as your own. Acting justly builds trust and long-term respect. Wisdom pause. Before reacting, whether to criticism, temptation, or crisis, take a deliberate breath and ask, what is within my control in this moment? Direct your energy to what you can change and let go of what you cannot. Temperance question. When you feel an impulse to speak harshly, to indulge in overconsumption, or to react online, ask, will this choice serve my highest good, or am I feeding my emotions? That pause creates space for rational action. Courage decision. Identify moments when you shy away from truth, perhaps avoiding a hard conversation with a friend or colleague. Ask, will I choose what is easy or what is right? Let courage guide you to speak honestly, even if your hands tremble. Practice these short pauses so often that they become second nature. Over weeks, you'll notice that your intuition begins to align with Stoic principles. You'll react less from impulse and more from reflection. Your relationships will deepen as people sense your fairness and integrity. Your work will gain clarity as you focus on what you can control. And in moments of adversity, when fear, uncertainty, and doubt rise, you'll feel that quiet, unwavering assurance. You know your compass, and you trust it. Closing thoughts. Virtue is as a way of life. Living by virtue isn't an unattainable ideal. It's an everyday practice, a set of simple questions that guide you through life's complexities. Justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage are not lofty concepts. They're living forces that shape our actions, habits, and relationships. By pausing to ask, is this aligned with virtue? We calibrate our lives on a deeper level. Over time, that calibration becomes our compass, pointing us toward a life of integrity, resilience, and profound purpose. Ask yourself right now, in the next hour, how can I let justice guide my words? How can I apply wisdom to my next choice? Where might temperance prevent me from reacting too quickly? And when will I summon courage to act despite fear? By weaving these questions into your daily fabric, you transform each mundane moment into an opportunity to live by virtue. That, my friends, is the Stoic path, a life not driven by external rewards or fleeting pleasures, but anchored in the timeless compass of the soul. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads, heart pounding, wondering whether to speak up or stay silent, to react out of anger or pause to consider, to rush toward comfort or lean into uncertainty? In those moments, our choices reveal who we truly are. Ancient Stoic philosophers believed that a life guided by virtue, by a clear moral compass, centers us, anchors us, and transforms every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Virtue isn't an abstract ideal reserved for philosophers. It's the practical compass that guides us in daily life, illuminating every decision with integrity, wisdom, and courage. Today, let's explore the 4 cardinal Stoic virtues: justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage, and see how building the habit of pausing to ask, is this aligned with virtue, can reshape our actions, strengthen our character, and guide us through even the stormiest seas with unwavering clarity. 1. Justice, the foundation of fairness. When you hear the word justice, you might picture courtrooms, gavel strikes, or grand debates about laws and punishments. But for the Stoics, justice was far more than a legal concept. It was an everyday ethic, a commitment to honor the dignity of every person, to treat others fairly, and to act with integrity in even the smallest moments. Imagine you're in a work meeting and a colleague knowingly presents inaccurate data to make their proposal look stronger. Most of us feel that uncomfortable knot in our stomachs. Do I stay silent and keep the peace, or do I call out the lie? Justice demands that we speak the truth, not to score points or embarrass someone, but because fairness and integrity matter. If we allow deceit to stand unchallenged, we erode trust, seed cynicism, and betray our own principles. But justice also manifests in more subtle ways. Suppose you see a peer being overlooked for credit on a team project. Speaking up, "I see that Alex's analysis was pivotal to this outcome," means recognizing contributions that might otherwise remain in the shadows. That act of fairness builds trust, fosters collaboration, and creates a culture in which everyone feels valued. Justice also reminds us to practice empathy. When a friend shares a painful story, justice calls us to listen without judgment, to offer kindness rather than condescension. By treating others as we wish to be treated, valuing their perspectives, acknowledging their struggles, we weave a tapestry of respect and mutual support. Pause and ask. Before you act, pause for a moment and ask, is this fair to everyone involved? Let that question guide you to speak truth, share credit, and extend compassion even when it feels easier to look away. 2. Wisdom, discernment in an unpredictable world. Wisdom in the Stoic sense isn't simply about being smart or accumulating facts. It's the ability to discern what lies within your control and what does not, and to respond with clarity and calm rather than panic and reaction. In other words, wisdom teaches us where to focus our mental and emotional energy. Think back to a time when someone criticized you online, or when an urgent email landed in your inbox just as you were about to leave work. Your first impulse might be to fire off a heated reply or to chastise yourself for not anticipating the demand. Wisdom invites you to pause, breathe, and ask, is this within my control? Can I change someone else's opinion? Or can I only choose how I respond? Recognizing that the criticism belongs to another's perspective frees you from the spiral of defensiveness. You can choose whether to respond constructively, to learn from the feedback, or to let it slide without harming your peace of mind. Here's a simple exercise. The next time something unexpected happens, a flight delayed, a project requirement changed, pause and ask, what's within my control here? If you can call a different flight or revise your plan, do so with intention. If not, direct your efforts to what you can influence. Your attitude, your focus, your calm. By continually applying this distinction, you transform chaos into opportunity. You learn to ride life's waves rather than be swept away by them. Pause and ask. In any situation of stress or uncertainty, take a breath and ask, what is within my control right now? Let that guide your next step with clarity and equanimity rather than reacting impulsively to what you cannot change. 3. Temperance, mastery over impulses. Temperance, or self-control, is about knowing when to stop in our speech, in our desires, in our reactions, and choosing moderation over excess. In a world of constant temptation, social media notifications, endless streaming, impulsive spending, temperance is the art of pausing before we give in to each impulse. Let's say you wake up to a barrage of urgent emails and decide to dive into work without a moment's rest. An hour later, you find yourself reaching for a sugary snack to counter that mid-morning slump. Then you scroll through social media because your focus is shot. Before you know it, your morning has been hijacked by impulsive reactions and scattered attention. Stoic temperance invites you to pause and ask, will indulging in this impulse serve my long-term goals or simply gratify a fleeting desire? Maybe the sugar fix gives you a 15-minute boost but crashes your energy afterward. Perhaps mindless scrolling fills the void but drains your productivity. Instead, practice small acts of restraint. Wait 10 minutes before grabbing that snack, set a timer to limit social media to 5 minutes, or take 3 deep breaths before reacting to that urgent email. These tiny moments of self-discipline recalibrate your mind, helping you act from purpose rather than impulse. In social interactions, temperance also means choosing your words carefully. When someone ruffles your feathers, resist the urge to fire back a sharp retort. Ask, will reacting in anger help or harm this relationship? Often the wisest response is silence, a pause that shows you value understanding over the need to be right. Pause and ask. When an impulse strikes, whether to indulge in a craving, to speak in anger, or to chase distraction, pause and ask, is this choice aligned with my highest good? Let that hesitation be your tool for self-mastery. 4. Courage, boldness amid uncertainty. Courage, the fourth cardinal Stoic virtue, is the willingness to act rightly despite fear. It's not recklessness or bravado, it's the calm determination to stand by principle even when the stakes feel high. True courage often means speaking the truth at personal risk, apologizing when our ego screams to hold our ground, or embracing uncertainty in pursuit of a meaningful goal. Imagine you discover an ethical lapse at your company. You could look the other way, protect your position and say, better not ruffle feathers. Or you could summon courage, gather evidence, and speak honestly to leadership, knowing you may face backlash. That's Stoic courage in action, prioritizing virtue over personal safety. Courage also shows up in everyday life. Maybe you avoid asking for help because you fear appearing incompetent, or perhaps you hesitate to share your authentic thoughts in a conversation, worrying about judgment. Courage asks, am I letting fear silence my truth? When you choose to speak up kindly, whether to ask for a raise, to share a new idea at work, or to apologize after a conflict, you practice courage. Each act of truth-telling or apology chips away at the power of fear and strengthens your capacity for honest connection. A personal example, I once prepared to address a toxic rumor circulating about my team. My heart raced. What if I alienate colleagues? What if I look petty? But I remembered a Stoic maxim. It is cowardly to suffer wrong when one might defend oneself honorably. So with a steady voice, I addressed the office, laid out the facts calmly, and invited an open discussion. Some tension followed, but ultimately, we cleared the air. That act of courage preserved our team's integrity and saved precious trust. The path of bravery is never easy, but it aligns us with our deepest values and often yields unexpected solidarity. Pause and ask, when fear nips at your heels, whether to tell a difficult truth, pursue a risky opportunity, or apologize humbly, pause and ask, is this the courageous path aligned with my principles? Let courage carry you forward, even if your hands tremble. 5. Virtue is our daily compass. So how do we weave these 4 cardinal virtues, justice, wisdom, temperance, courage, into the fabric of our everyday decisions? The Stoics offered one simple but profound practice. Before every significant action, big or small, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, is this aligned with justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage? In that brief moment of stillness, you establish a powerful filter that channels your impulses into purpose. Imagine starting your day with that mindset. You wake up, scroll through your phone to check the news, and see a heated debate unfolding online. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause and ask, would an impulsive comment honor justice? Would it demonstrate wisdom? Am I speaking from temperance, or do I risk fueling a fire? And do I have the courage to say something thoughtful if I choose to speak? That split-second reflection transforms an impulsive reaction into an intentional response, one that advances meaningful dialogue rather than amplifying chaos. Throughout your day, maintain that pause. Before sending an email, before snapping back at a frustrating driver, before making a purchase you hadn't budgeted for. You'll find that, at first, questioning everything can feel tedious. You might catch yourself smiling at the memory of your frantic autopilot days. But as you practice, something remarkable happens. That habit of pausing, asking, is this virtuous, becomes second nature. You no longer need to deliberate consciously at every step. Your intuition realigns with Stoic principles. Your mind becomes the compass itself. When a crisis hits, a sudden job loss, a family emergency, an unforeseen health scare, virtue becomes our true North Star. While emotions swirl like a storm, that momentary habit to ask, what is just? What would wisdom dictate? How can I practice self-control? Where must I summon courage? Provides stability. You may not have control over the external chaos, but you have control over your inner stance. In that stance, you discover reserves of resilience you never knew you possessed. 6. Bringing virtue into every moment. Let's make this concrete with a simple daily framework. Morning check-in. As soon as you wake, take a 3-second pause before reaching for your phone. Ask, today, how will I practice justice toward others? What choices can I make with wisdom? Where might temptation arise, and how can I exercise temperance? What situation will call for courage, and how can I prepare? Jot down one intention under each virtue, e.g., justice, acknowledge my colleague's contribution in the team meeting. Wisdom, pause before responding to email. Temperance, avoid morning social media scrolling. Courage, ask my manager for feedback on my performance. Midday refresher. At lunch or a mid-afternoon break, pause again. Reflect quickly on your morning. Did I uphold justice by recognizing my teammate? Did I avoid impulsive reactions? Where did I falter? Recognize one small success in one area for correction. For example, success, I let my coworker finish their point. Correction, I spent 5 minutes on Instagram. Next time, I'll use that time to review my goals. Evening reflection. Before bed, find a quiet moment. Sit on your porch, lie in bed, stare out the window. Ask, what decisions did I make today, and how did they align with each virtue? Where did fear drive me instead of courage? Where did I rush without wisdom? When did I speak or stay silent in service of justice? Where did I give in to excess instead of temperance? Journal for 5 minutes. Record your insights without judgment. That journal becomes a lantern guiding your growth, revealing patterns to refine tomorrow. 7. Overcoming common obstacles. You might think, but I don't have time to pause before every decision, or I'll never remember all these questions under stress. The Stoics anticipated this. The habit-building process is gradual. Start with just one virtue, perhaps wisdom, the practice of distinguishing what's in your control. As you cultivate that habit, the others naturally follow. Over weeks, the pause becomes briefer but deeper. Your mind wires itself to recognize moments of ethical choice or emotional upheaval. Eventually, you don't need a conscious checklist. You have an intuitive guide, a mind steeped in virtue. Another obstacle is the mistaken belief that virtue means self-denial or rigidity. In reality, living by virtue brings freedom. When justice guides you, you no longer worry about playing favorites. When wisdom informs you, you avoid wasted anxiety. When temperance is your ally, you find peace in simplicity. And when courage is your compass, you discover that fear loses its power over you. 8. Living a life anchored by virtue. In a world obsessed with shortcuts, hacks, and quick fixes, the Stoic path feels countercultural. We crave immediate gratification, likes, promotions, praise, often without questioning whether these goals align with our deeper values. But virtue, justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage offers a timeless compass. It asks us to look beyond the next reward and align each step with integrity. When we live by this compass, our choices ripple outward. We build workplaces where truth matters more than politics, relationships where empathy prevails over ego, and communities where accountability replaces blame. In moments of crisis, be it a financial downturn, a global pandemic, or a personal loss, virtue anchors us. While emotions crash like thunder, our inner North Star guides us forward. So I invite you, tomorrow morning, before the world taps you into action with alerts and to-do lists, take a breath. Ask, what would justice look like for me today? Where can I bring wisdom to my actions? How will I practice self-control? When will I choose courage over comfort? Let those questions shape your day. Watch as, over time, the habit of virtue becomes your default setting. You may not be perfect, Stoicism never promises perfection, but you will be oriented, steadfast, and alive with purpose. Remember the words of Marcus Aurelius, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Let those words serve as your mantra. In every encounter, every decision, in every breath, let virtue be the compass that guides you. And as you navigate life's winding roads, inevitable twists, unexpected storms, exhilarating joys, rest assured, with virtue as your compass, you will never lose your way. Have you ever found yourself caught in an emotional storm, your heart racing, your thoughts spiraling, before you even realize why you're reacting? Maybe someone cuts you off in traffic, and instantly you feel that hot flash of anger, fingers gripping the wheel, and words forming in your mind that you'd never say aloud. Or perhaps a friend's comment hits an old wound, and before you know it, you're defending yourself, snapping back, or retreating into silence. In those moments, our emotions aren't simply passing through us. They're screaming directives, strike back, or hide away. And if we obey them without question, we often wound ourselves or others, leaving behind regret, fractured trust, and a lingering sense of unease. But what if I told you there's another way, a stoic way, to relate to your emotions? One that honors them as signals without letting them hijack your actions? That way is called emotional detachment, a disciplined form of love that acknowledges the reality of our feelings without making them our masters. Today, we're going to explore how to transform that split-second emotional reaction into a moment of clarity, how to use practical techniques to create space when anger or fear rises, and how to reframe others' reactions to soften our own. By the end of this conversation, you'll have a powerful toolkit for stepping back from the brink of an emotional outburst and responding with wisdom rather than getting swept away in the tide of impulsivity. 1. Emotions as signals, not directives. Let's begin by understanding what emotions truly are. Imagine you are walking down a forest path and you suddenly hear a rustling in the bushes. Your heart leaps. It's an alarm bell, a primal signal that something's amiss. That's exactly how emotions work. They arise automatically, like alarms in our mind, alerting us to perceive threats, losses, or opportunities. Anger flares when we feel attacked or disrespected. Fear surges when our safety or self-esteem is threatened. Anxiety whispers that something could go wrong in the future. These emotional alarms are vital. They keep us alert. prompt us to solve problems, and push us to protect what we value. But here's the catch. While emotions inform us, they are not direct commands. If you react to that initial spike of anger, yelling at the driver who cut you off, you may satisfy the instinctual rush of adrenaline, but you'll likely regret it a few minutes later as calm returns and reality sets in. You're late for work, stomach tied in knots, and your words have probably escalated tension rather than resolving anything. In Stoic philosophy, we learn that emotions are signals, not directives. They are meant to guide our attention toward an issue, but not to become our boss. To see this in action, consider this scenario. You receive a curt text from a colleague, "We need this report now." Instantly, you feel irritation and stress. Impulses pushing you to lash out with a sarcastic reply or to panic and rush through subpar work. Instead, if you treat your irritation as an alarm, I'm feeling rushed and annoyed, you can acknowledge that feeling without letting it drive your behavior. You might pause and think, I can choose to respond calmly. Understood, I'll deliver it by 3 p.m. That small pause transforms an emotional directive into a thoughtful action, preserving your relationships and giving you control over your choices. Emotional detachment doesn't mean ignoring feelings or pretending you don't care. On the contrary, it's a form of disciplined love, caring enough to notice your emotions, to appreciate their signaling role, but refusing to let them dictate your behavior. This is not numbness, it's clarity. 2. Practical detachment techniques. Right, let's get practical. How do we create that crucial space between feeling and reacting? How do we catch that alarm of anger or fear before it becomes a runaway freight train? Here are a few techniques Stoics have used for centuries, adapted for our modern, fast-paced lives. 2.1. The 30-second step away. When you feel anger or anxiety surging, perhaps you're in a heated argument or your blood starts pounding, you don't have to obey it instantly. Instead, give yourself a 30-second step away. Literally remove yourself from the triggering environment. If you're about to reply in anger to a message, step away from your phone. If you're arguing face-to-face, say, "Excuse me, I need a moment." Use those 30 seconds to pause your physical body. Stand up, stretch, or walk to the sink. Once there, try splashing your face with cold water or running your hands under a cold tap. The shock of the cool water on your skin forces your brain out of autopilot fight or flight mode and into a more reflective state. That's not just an old wives' tale. Cold water stimulates the vagus nerve, helping your nervous system move from survival mode into thinking mode. Even a brief walk around a room, focusing on the feeling of your feet against the floor, can ground you and clear enough headspace to choose a more constructive response. Once the 30 seconds are up, don't rush back into the heat of the moment. Instead, ask yourself, what's the wisest next step? That might be taking a few deep breaths and returning to the conversation with a calmer tone, or it might mean waiting even longer, gathering your thoughts, and then responding in writing with a clear, composed message. The key is every time you hit that emotional pause button, just for 30 seconds, you create a micro moment where choice re-enters the equation. 2.2. Catching the flicker of space. In meditation circles, we talk about that tiny micro moment between stimulus and reaction, the flicker of space before you spring into action. Recognizing that split-second gap is powerful. Imagine you're at the breakfast table and your partner says something that feels dismissive. Your immediate impulse might be to snap. Why do you always do that? But if you can catch that flicker of space, you interrupt the usual chain reaction. That split-second stop is like grabbing the steering wheel firmly as your car drifts off the road. When you seize that flicker, just a fraction of a second, you create the possibility of a measured choice. You might instead say, "I felt unheard when you said that. Can we talk about what you meant?" That pivot from reactive lash to composed conversation transforms the dynamic and de-escalates potential conflict. The more you practice catching that flicker, in traffic, in meetings, at home, the more it becomes second nature. You develop a habit of emotional mindfulness, a constant, gentle observation of your inner state, like a quiet sentinel perched at the gates of your mind. Over time, that sentinel grows more vigilant, giving you earlier warning signs of emotional upheaval and more space to choose your response. 3. Reframing others' reactions. Now that we've covered how to manage our own emotional signals, let's turn outward. How do we interpret the reactions of others, especially those that sting? A friend snaps at you unexpectedly. You bristle, take it personally, and the weight of offense sits heavy in your chest. But what if you reframe that reaction? Instead of assuming they attacked you out of malice, consider that they might be reacting from their own hidden wounds: stress, fear, past hurt. People often lash out not because of who you are, but because they're in pain themselves. Picture this. A colleague sends you a terse email. Your draft needs serious work. Your first instinct might be to fire off a defensive reply. I worked hard on that. At least I'm not sloppy like some. But if you pause and reframe, you might think, maybe they're under pressure to meet a deadline or dealing with their own insecurities. That shift in perspective doesn't excuse condescension, but it changes your stance. Instead of taking it personally, you can respond with empathy and clarity. I appreciate the feedback. Would you mind clarifying which sections need the most attention? That question invites collaboration rather than conflict. Reframing others' reactions also prevents us from bleeding from every slight, real or perceived. When someone's anger or impatience feels like an arrow aimed at you, imagine putting up an emotional shield. Recognize their reaction is their own. It's not necessarily about me. That doesn't mean letting toxic behavior slide. It simply means not absorbing their emotional fire as if it were your own. You maintain clarity and calm while still addressing the issue, engaging with their words, not their emotional turmoil. 4. Practicing detachment to soften the world. Emotional detachment isn't about becoming cold, distant, or indifferent. It's about cultivating a stable, clear inner space so that we can engage with the world from strength rather than weakness. By practicing detachment, we don't change other people. We change how we experience them. Think of a serene pond. When the water is still, you can see reflections clearly. But once you toss a pebble in, ripples distort the image. Emotions, like those pebbles, create ripples that blur our perception. By detaching, not to become numb, but to remain anchored, we allow others' reactions to wash over us without distorting our inner calm. We become the quiet pond beneath the ripples, capable of reflection even amid disturbance. Here's a practical routine you can integrate into your day. 1. Morning centering. As soon as you wake, take 3 deep breaths. Before grabbing your phone or diving into tasks, silently note, today I will observe my emotions as signals. I will not let them dictate my actions. This intention plants a seed of detachment that you can revisit throughout the day. 2. Midday check-in. Around lunch or early afternoon, find 30 seconds to close your eyes and breathe. Ask, what emotions have I experienced so far? How did I react? Where could I have paused instead of reacting? In that moment, acknowledge any upset, stress, annoyance, frustration, without judgment. Recognize it as a signal rather than a directive. Then let it pass, returning to your tasks with renewed clarity. 3. Evening reflection. Before bed, revisit the day's emotional highlights. Did you feel anger flare? Did fear push you to hesitate? For each instance, ask, where did I react impulsively? What signal was I receiving? How might I respond differently next time? Journaling these insights, just a few sentences, reinforces your ability to view emotions as data rather than commands, guiding your actions toward choice and wisdom. By weaving these micro-practices into your routine, you train your mind to step back from the whirlwind of emotional reactions and choose responses aligned with your deepest values. Over weeks, that detachment softens the world, not by dulling your sensitivity, but by granting you the freedom to engage fully without being swept away. 5. Bringing it all together. Let's recap how these pieces fit into a cohesive practice. 1. Embrace emotions as signals. Recognize that the instant surge of anger, fear, or anxiety is your mind's alarm system from alerting you to something. Notice it without panic and without embracing it as a directive. 2. Create micro moments of space. When the one alarm sounds, practice stepping away for 30 seconds. Walk, splash cold water, or focus on a deep breath. Use that gap to pivot from impulse to reflection. 3. Catch the flicker of space. Cultivate the subtle awareness of that brief moment between feeling and reaction. That flicker, though short, holds the power to alter your next step, transform you from reactive to proactive. 4. Reframe others' reactions. When someone's behavior hurts or it angers you, remind yourself that they're reacting from their own wounds. This perspective reduces personal offense and opens the door to empathy. 5. Weave daily habits of detachment. Morning intention. Observe, don't obey my emotions. Midday pause. Reflect on emotional patterns. Evening journal. Analyze reactions and plan for improvement. By practicing these steps consistently, you'll find that your emotional responses become more measured, your relationships soften, and your decisions gain clarity. Instead of being buffeted by every slight or provocation, you stand as a grounded presence, a calm harbor in the storm of emotion. 6. A Stoic perspective on emotional mastery. The Stoics believe that life's greatest challenge is not external hardship, but internal turmoil. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." By treating emotions as signals, guiding beacons rather than orders, you reclaim that power. You transform from a passenger on a turbulent sea into a captain at the helm, steering with reason and compassion. Emotional detachment is not about denying feelings or becoming robotic. It's a form of disciplined love toward yourself and others. It honors the reality of our humanity, recognizing that emotions will arise, but it refuses to let those emotions drive behavior unconsciously. Instead, we allow emotions to inform us, point us to areas where our beliefs may need examination, where our attachments may not serve us, or where our values can shine more brightly. In every moment of anger, we glimpse injustice. In every flicker of fear, we see what we truly care about. By learning to step back, breathe, and choose, we align our actions with our deepest values, forging a life of clarity, compassion, and resilience. 7. A final invitation. Tonight, as you go to bed, take a few minutes to reflect on the day's emotional moments. Maybe there was a time you snapped at someone or held it back because you were afraid. Acknowledge those moments without self-judgment. Then imagine yourself in the next similar situation, pausing for 30 seconds, feeling the initial surge, and choosing your response from a place of inner calm. Write that intention down and let it guide you tomorrow. Remember, emotional detachment is not a destination, but a journey, a lifetime practice of observing, pausing, and choosing. Each time you honor that brief flicker of space, you strengthen your capacity for clarity. Each time you reframe another's reaction, you foster empathy. And each time you greet your own emotional alarms with disciplined love, you inch closer to the Stoic ideal. A mind that remains steadfast, a heart that remains compassionate, and a soul that remains unshaken by the storms of impulse. As Seneca said, no man can have a peaceful life who thinks too much about lengthening it. Likewise, no one finds true emotional peace by reacting impulsively to every emotional surge. Peace emerges when we step back, feel, reflect, and choose. Let us walk that path together, cultivating emotional detachment and clarity, so that in every moment, rain or shine, joy or sorrow, we can respond with wisdom, temperance, and unshakable calm. Have you ever paused at the end of a long day and felt a tug, as if your mind were whispering, there must be more to living than this? We go through routines, wake up, work, scroll our feeds, sleep, and somewhere along the way, our inner compass dulls. We trade clarity for convenience, depth for distraction, purpose for passivity. But Stoicism invites us to awaken from autopilot, to see our lives not as a series of happenstances, but as a canvas we paint with intention. Over the past chapters, we've explored 15 Stoic lessons, each a brushstroke in a larger portrait of living sharply, wisely, and with unshakable purpose. Let's gather those strokes and see the picture they form, a quiet rebellion against mere survival and toward a life of clarity, discipline, and profound meaning. 1. Intelligence as calm action. We began by redefining intelligence, not as an accumulation of facts, but as the capacity to remain composed when the world spins out of control. True intelligence is measured by how calmly you make decisions in chaos. It's not about quoting statistics or winning arguments. It's about showing up steady when others waver. Next time you feel overwhelmed, remember a sharp mind isn't a frantic mind. It's a calm one. 2. Curiosity is the lifeline of learning. If intelligence anchors us, curiosity launches us. Surface-level questions keep us on the shore. Deep, restless inquiry propels us into uncharted waters. As Einstein said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." Stoic curiosity doesn't settle for obvious answers. It digs beneath our assumptions to reveal hidden truths. Cultivate that fierce curiosity. Let it drive you to ask, why do I believe this? What else could be true? 3. Engaging the senses as extensions of thought. In a world glued to screens, the Stoics urged us to remember our bodies. Leonardo da Vinci taught us that sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, each sense is a doorway to deeper understanding. Drawing a tree forces us to see every shade of green. Listening without distraction reveals unspoken truths. Handwriting cements ideas in our nervous system. Let the senses anchor you to reality. When life feels abstract, draw it, touch it, breathe it. Real knowledge lives in the body as much as the mind. 4. Embracing uncertainty and choosing courage. Our brains love predictability. We cling to routines because uncertainty feels like peril. But Stoic wisdom reminds us that the only guarantee in life is change. Fear often masquerades as caution, tempting us to avoid genuine desire. We might perfect a resume for a safe job rather than apply for our dream. Each time we choose comfort over courage, we stall our growth. Instead, embrace uncertainty as a forge that sharpens your resolve. Every "I'll try" counters fear with possibility. That's where courage is born, not when fear vanishes, but when you act despite it. 5. Whole brain thinking and integration. Traditional education boxes us into left-brained or right-brained roles, logic versus creativity. But geniuses like Leonardo and Einstein merge both hemispheres, letting analysis and imagination dance together. When you sketch a mind map instead of crafting a list, or imagine a solution before crunching numbers, you activate both sides of your brain. Whole brain thinking isn't a gimmick, it's a way of honoring the unity between reason and wonder. Next time you're stuck, try drawing your ideas instead of typing them. Let your mind breathe in color and shape. 6. Physical foundation for a sharp mind. We can't think sharply if our bodies are running on empty. Stoics and Renaissance masters alike recognize that a sound mind requires a sound vessel. That means balanced nutrition, less sugar, more greens, quality sleep, and movement that fosters both strength and flexibility. Yoga, dance, walking, or martial arts. Choose practices that release stored tension and reconnect you to your body. When you treat your body as the foundation, you activate a cascade of mental clarity, emotional stability, and creative energy. 7. Making connections in thinking and principles. Geniuses excel at linking seemingly unrelated things. Seashells on a mountaintop reveal ancient seafloors. An athlete's mindset informs corporate leadership. Stoic art of perception teaches us to convert obstacles into tools. Whenever frustration hits, ask, what is this trying to teach me? Or, what does this remind me of that I've overcome before? By forging connections between past experiences, diverse fields, and unexpected ideas, you transform each fragment of knowledge into a cohesive whole. Your mind becomes a network of neural links, ready to solve problems with elegant insight. 8. Using challenges as training. Rather than fleeing hardship, Stoics train with it. Each inconvenience, a flat tire, a harsh critique, a stalled project, is a chance to practice patience, self-control, or optimism. Think of adversity as your personal blacksmith's forge, shaping your resilience. When the pandemic shuttered my friend's cafe, he could have wallowed in defeat. Instead, he studied financial systems, risk management, and leadership. 2 years later, he returned stronger with a franchise model. Hardship wasn't his enemy, it was his mentor. 9. Reflection, deep reading, and intentional study. We live in an age of endless information snacks, 10-minute videos, tweet threads, soundbite summaries. But Stoic growth demands deep reading and intentional study. It's not about how many books you consume, it's about how deeply you digest each idea. Choose uncomfortable books, meditations. Stillness is the key, thinking fast and slow. And read them slowly, rewriting concepts from opposing angles and teaching them to others. Quality over quantity. Slow down, engage with complexity, test ideas in real life. Real reading is a form of rebellion against distraction. 10. Intentional stillness. In the cacophony of notifications, stillness becomes a radical act. Purposeful pauses, washing dishes, waiting at a red light, are doorways to clarity. Weekly, carve out 2 hours of silence. Walk alone, journal your thoughts, or simply observe the world around you. In that stillness, questions like, is this truly important? Cut through excuses and reveal your core values. If you fear silence at first, know that your mind will squirm. But with each practice, you peel away layers of noise until your authentic self emerges. That is where real insight lives. 11. Stepping into discomfort and designing challenge. Comfort zones dull our adaptability. Growth thrives on challenge. Join a group where you're the most inexperienced, learn a skill that doesn't come naturally, or engage deeply with someone whose beliefs oppose yours. The first step into discomfort is a leap of faith. When you take classes outside your expertise, perhaps design if you're a writer, or public speaking if you're an introvert, you'll stumble. But each stumble is a seed of new strength. Challenge yourself regularly and watch your mind expand, your confidence grow, and your resilience become your signature. Reflection and inner intelligence. How often do you end a day and ask, do I truly understand why I acted that way? Most of us race from one task to the next without pausing for honest self-reflection. The nightly mirror, those few moments before bed when you ask, which part of me made that decision? Was I driven by fear, ego, or integrity? Is where inner intelligence is forged. Record yourself giving a presentation, watch it back, and observe patterns you wouldn't notice in the moment. This habit of third-person observation reveals blind spots, deepens self-awareness, and transforms impulsive reactions into conscious choices. 13. Feedback from others. Outside perspectives are priceless mirrors for our blind spots. When 3 people tell you that you struggle with listening, don't recoil. Lean in. Ask for examples, clarify their stories, and filter their feedback through a neutral lens. You don't need to accept every critique at face value, but you cannot ignore repeated signals. Over time, inviting honest feedback shifts your nervous system from survival mode to adaptive mode. Fear transforms into curiosity. Monthly check-ins with mentors or trusted friends create collision moments that expose your blind spots and accelerate your growth. 14. Living by virtue, as compass Stoicism centers on 4 cardinal virtues: justice, wisdom, temperance, courage, that become your North Star in daily decisions. Justice calls you to treat others fairly, speaking up when deception arises and acknowledging the contributions of those overlooked. Wisdom reminds you to pause, discern what is within your control, and channel your energy wisely. Temperance teaches restraint. Pause before sending that angry email or indulging in impulse, choosing instead measured action. Courage asks you to speak truth, apologize humbly, and lean into discomfort rather than cling to safety. By pausing before each choice and asking, is this aligned with virtue? You cultivate a habit so deeply ingrained that in moments of crisis, virtue becomes your default guide, not a distant ideal. 15. Emotional detachment and clarity. Finally, we learn that emotions are signals, alarms, not directives. When anger flares, step away for 30 seconds. Splash cold water on your face, walk around the room, or close your eyes and breathe. That micro moment is the flicker of space where clarity emerges. Recognize that others often react from their wounds, not true intentions. When a friend snaps, remind yourself, they're hurting, not targeting me. This reframing softens your response, fosters empathy, and frees you from bleeding from every slight. Emotional detachment thus becomes a disciplined form of love, allowing you to acknowledge feelings without letting them dictate your behavior. Bringing it all together, a quiet rebellion. These 15 lessons are not a checklist for perfection. They are invitations to a quiet rebellion against autopilot living, a rebellion that calls you to live with more clarity, discipline, and purpose. Each lesson is a brushstroke in a larger masterpiece of intentional living. 1. Calm action defines true intelligence. 2. Curiosity fuels lifelong growth. 3. Engaging the senses grounds you in reality. 4. Embracing uncertainty sharpens your courage. 5. Whole brain thinking dissolves perceived limits. 6. Physical health is the foundation for mental clarity. 7. Connecting knowledge transforms insights into wisdom. 8. Adversity serves as your personal forge. 9. Deep reading is your rebellion against distraction. 10. Intentional stillness reveals your authentic self. 11. Design discomfort breaks the bonds of comfort zones. 12. Reflection bursts inner intelligence. 13. Feedback from others exposes blind spots. 14. Living by virtue guides you when the path is unclear. 15. Emotional detachment transforms signals into choices. What ties these lessons together is a radical shift in perspective. To live not as a passenger tossed by wind and tide, but as a navigator who charts each course with intention. When you practice these lessons, you become a quiet force, a calm presence in a frenetic world, an anchor of clarity, a beacon of wisdom for yourself and those around you. Your final charge: begin living on purpose. If any of these truths or questions stirred something in you, a flicker of recognition, a pang of longing, then consider this moment your invitation to begin living on purpose, not just surviving on autopilot. Notice that spark. Pin it in your mind, write it on a sticky note. Let it be the seed of something new. For example, maybe the idea of intelligence as calm action resonated. Tomorrow morning, when you face that first urgent email, pause to breathe. Choose clarity over chaos. Or perhaps intentional stillness awakens something. You might commit to 2 silent hours this weekend to see what wells up when the noise goes away. Maybe design discomfort called you. Sign up for a class you know you'll struggle with, or strike up a conversation with someone who holds an opposing view. Not to argue, but to understand. Each intentional step, no matter how small, marks the beginning of living with purpose. Remember, practice doesn't mean perfection. Some days you'll falter, defaulting to fear instead of courage, impulsivity instead of temperance. That's okay. What matters is that you notice, that you return to the path. Each stumble is a lesson, each moment of reflection, a course correction. In the coming weeks and months, let these practices weave into your daily life. When you wake, pause. What would justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage look like today? When emotions surge, step back for a brief moment. This is a signal. How can I respond wisely? When discomfort beckons, lean into it. What can I learn from this challenge? When the world demands your attention, give yourself permission to step into stillness. What truly matters to me in this moment? As you do, you'll feel something shift, a newfound sense of agency, a growing reservoir of inner calm, and a clarity that permeates every choice. You'll be living not at the mercy of life's currents, but as an active navigator, using Stoic virtues as your compass. Over time, you'll forge that quiet strength, a resilient, unwavering presence that flourishes even when storms rage around you. So here's my final invitation. Hold on to this moment. Let it be the seed of your transformation. If ever you feel lost, revisit these 15 lessons. Notice how each one offers a lantern in the dark, a steadfast guide to living with purpose. With continuous practice, pause by pause, question by question, challenge by challenge, you will cultivate lasting clarity, sharpness, and a quiet strength that will carry you through whatever life brings. Thank you for staying until the end. If you felt a flicker of resonance, an uncomfortable question, a spark of curiosity, let that linger. Write it down, revisit it regularly, and let it guide your steps. This isn't just content to watch. It's an invitation to live with purpose every single day. Choose to walk this Stoic path, and you may discover, as countless seekers before you have, that a life lived intentionally, anchored by virtue, guided by wisdom, enriched by curiosity, and tempered by stillness, is the most profound rebellion of all. Start today with a single breath of intention. Pause, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, which values will guide my actions right now? If you feel that spark of awakened purpose, the urge to live with courage, clarity, and compassion, hit subscribe so you never miss our weekly Stoic practice sessions. Share in the comments a moment when you chose a deliberate pause over an impulsive reaction. Your story could inspire someone else on this journey. And if you know friends or colleagues craving deeper meaning, click share to invite them along. Every subscription, every comment, every share is a pledge that you'll stand not as a passive observer of life's storms, but as a steady navigator, charting a course defined by justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage. Let's build a community rooted in resilience and insight, one intentional step at a time. Together, we'll transform each challenge into a chance to grow, each pause into a path forward, and each day into a life truly lived on purpose. Join us